Rabbit.
The meeting of the Dudley-Charlton Regional School Committee is now in session. It is Wednesday, January 9th. It is 7 p.m. We're at the Shepherd Hill Regional High School. We will all stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our regular meeting of Wednesday, December 12th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Do I have a second? Okay, discussion? Catherine?
On page 3, about halfway down, I'm quoted about the spending for the hiring of school committee people, that Mass Association people. The second sentence says, Mrs. Cavallo said, the outcome of the study, I'd like to add, I didn't say to support, I said may want us to support an assistant superintendent, which could easily cost more than $100,000, something she could not support. Yeah, that's the end. You want me to repeat it? So you see where I am? It's the second line of the paragraph starting with my name. Mrs. Cavallo said the outcome of the study, then add, may want us to support an assistant superintendent, which could easily cost more than $100,000, something she could not support. Okay? Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
have some changes, but I had to use Sandy's paper, so.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all right. On page 6, the bottom of item F, we need to add Mrs. Antossi and Mrs. Reed both commented that calendar options for election days had been discussed several times, and a PD day had been scheduled for the presidential election. And also, Mrs. Antossi suggested that a change of venue could be considered.
Sandra, did you get that? You
I
probably
can-
can give her the
I
written.
can give that to you.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay.
And then, sorry. On page 3, under the paragraph regarding my comments to the study, I have reworded it. The second sentence, she continued, the cost investment provides a foundation of analysis to work with our new incoming superintendent. Mrs. Rabbit said, our structure does not have a second in command or clear definition of authority in the superintendent's absence. And then going down to under the next big paragraph, Mrs. Rabbit said this will define an organizational structure and provide a foundation and analysis that does not prohibit the new superintendent from putting his or her stamp on it. Recommendations may take more than 1 year to implement.
Anyone else? Okay, I have something to add too. On the last page, page 7, under Roman numeral 12, where it says, Jamie, when we sign the warrants, can there be a second signature sheet? And we had discussed that. And then Mrs. O'Coin stated that there is a subcommittee to sign the warrant when needed. Mrs. O'Coin is on it, Catherine Cabala, Stephanie Reed, and Mary Ann Toshi is for the payroll, and she is the backup. And then the committee, we all sign it during the meeting, or if needed. So, because it was a question in the central office about our subcommittee, and I did clarify it the last time, so I'd like that in the minutes, that we do have a subcommittee for the warrant. And so anyone else before?
I
Jamie?
have one on page 6, the third paragraph down. It said, Mrs. Terry said the district reviewed feedback from a survey several years ago. If I recall correctly, it was Mrs. Rabbit that said that. That there was a district reviewed feedback from a survey several years ago regarding the scheduling of the vacations and such.
Mhm.
I think it was you that said it and not me.
I need to look at it.
Because then I followed it with Mrs. Terry suggested conducting another survey, but I think originally you brought up Mrs. Rabbit.
I
as
think
it was.
she did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I did. I think I had, actually, you've come up to another place. Further down, I had made a clarification that Mrs. Rabbit said if a survey is created, it needs to be specifically worded and solicit priorities and options, so that the responses typically do not give information necessary to move forward. If people just say no, we haven't given them an alternative to vote in another manner, which is what we ran into with the first one.
Okay, anyone else before we take the vote? Okay, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
As amended. As amended.
As amended, yes, as amended. Okay, this evening we do have a warrant to sign.
I have some questions on
Oh,
the
that's
warrant.
right, Mary, go ahead.
Okay. I have questions and concerns on warrant 74. There was a payment of $6,400 to TD Garden on the athletic budgeted account, athletic supplies, which is an operational line item on the budget. My understanding is that this was a charge for the Shepherd Hill boys basketball team to participate in the Good Sports Invitational against Northbridge, and were to sell 400 tickets in order to fund this event, and they weren't sold. I don't know if any were sold at all, so I'd be interested to hear if any were sold and if there's an offset amount coming back to the district for that 6,400. But I also have other questions. I'm wondering why this was not planned for and funded through fundraisers or other means. Why was it even approved? Why would something like this not go through school committee approval, like show choir and band trips and events when they go away and it costs money? And at a minimum, why was this huge amount of money not charged against the student athletic revolving account, which is not part of the operational budget?
Are we going to have Mr. Burke address this, or?
Mr. Burke coincidentally is here this evening to do, I'm sure.
Come up,
he may-
Mr. Burke.
To do his athletic director's update. So I know that he and I had discussed this at our regular meeting, and I think he probably can address some of the issues that you have, and the questions that you have, I should say.
Sure. The idea behind the registering for the tournament was to give the kids an opportunity to have a great experience, play a basketball on the parquet at TD Garden. We did something like this a number of years ago where our soccer programs played 2 night games, the boys and then the girls played at Gillette Stadium. We tried to follow the same procedure and the same process that we did at that time, which was try to sell tickets at school, at lunch, try to sell tickets, give each student a packet of tickets to sell to their family and friends and neighbors, and you know, to try and spread the word throughout the community to anyone that might be interested. This really ended up being kind of a perfect storm of bad luck. When we agreed to do this, it was, okay, I'll tell you the bad luck. First of all, the timing. This was 2 days or a week after Christmas. It was an 8 o'clock game, which really hurt. It was a Sunday morning at 8 o'clock, which means the buses ended up having to leave at like 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. The fan bus left at 6:30, and it just didn't generate the popularity that the Gillette contests had generated, and it was much more difficult to market and much more difficult to sell. That was not the intention in the beginning. I would say about just under half the tickets were sold, and that's where we stand at this time.
And you had another-
6,400, what was that paying for? Like rental officials, or what did the 6,400 pay for?
Well, that was the registration fee, really. Here are 400 tickets for you to sell, and when you sell those 400 tickets, or here you buy these 400 tickets from us, you sell them at $16 a piece, you make your money back, and then there wasn't an additional registration fee or anything like that. But
So the 6,400, some of that will be coming back to us, correct? If we sold 200 tickets, isn't
right,
that?
exactly.
So we'll
yes.
get some back?
Yes,
Because we're
about
signing a
half.
warrant for 6,400 right now. We'll get,
Roughly 3,200.
so we'll get about 3,200 back.
It's about half.
Yeah. Now, the athletic fund, why wasn't it taken out of that? That's Mary's question.
It certainly could be. I don't know why it wasn't.
If I may. My understanding is that the account that it was taken out of is for athletic supplies, and am I incorrect?
If I may. No, it was taken from the athletic general fund accounts. You're absolutely correct on that. Knowing that we do have sold tickets and that we have revenue to offset against this, I can do one of two things. I can offset the amount of revenue that we receive to this expense, meaning move basically $3,200 to the athletic revolving account, or we could take the entire amount and move it to the athletic revolving account.
Are you getting back half of it?
Right, the question is, do we want to offset just the amount of revenue that we received, or do we want to just remove the bill completely and charge it to the revolving account?
Can I ask a question? Do we pay for any tournaments out of our supply account, or are they paid out of the athletic revolving account?
Again, most things get run through the general fund. The revolving account has been used to offset overages and those sorts of things in the past.
To answer your question, Ms. Rabbit, obviously, the other tournaments that we register for aren't that expensive. But yes, several times throughout the year, our cross-country teams, our indoor and outdoor track teams, and our wrestling teams enter tournaments that have registration fees, and they are usually paid for through the general funds.
Yeah, so you don't pay them. Does it really, I hate to say it, but does it really matter where this 6,400 comes from? I know technically it's just a company, it's the same money in the end. It's all the school money. But they're supposed to be independent of us, like the cafeteria, is that the point?
Well, the athletic revolving account, I think, was developed to deposit fees into.
Right.
And have as an offset, and it's used each and every year to offset athletic expenses.
But do they have to come to the general fund anyways, because that doesn't cover everything? They come anyways, don't they?
No, the athletic fees certainly do not cover it.
That's what I mean, so
Nor
we're
does
paying
the
for it
general fund by
anyway, so
itself.
isn't this, I think it's, if they have to pay for this tournament, then they're gonna come to us in June, they don't have enough for track or something, isn't that what's gonna happen, kind of?
Well, again.
Could I kind of say that? You might run out of money, so you'd have to come to the general account anyways to ask for whatever, for something in the spring? Could that happen?
Yes.
And that, I think it's logical to offset the amount of revenue that we receive.
Definitely.
Through the ticket sales, and then absorb the rest in the general fund. That would be my recommendation to the
Well,
committee.
I guess this is my misunderstanding, and maybe we need a conversation on a bigger scale regarding this, because we've talked about this in budget and finance in relation to our extracurricular activities. And we've had discussion over many years over the fee structure, and how these impact the operational budget. I guess my question would be, is if we were to take this program and compare it against the music programs, are we paying for the music program competitions out of our operation budget, or are they self-sustaining? Because it should be about equity and it should be about equality. We should be applying the same rules to all the extracurricular activities. And when when our students are going off to cheerleading competitions or show choir competitions or band competitions, they're coming here for approval, there's a cost, and we're hearing that, the cost to students is $500, $600 for those types of things. The tournaments don't come here, we don't know what those costs are. And I guess my question is really for more information to see that we are applying these guidelines across the spectrum of what we offer for extracurricular activities. I personally am more comfortable with the money coming out of the revolving account and then compensating, compensating back if this is not, if this type of process isn't applied across all of our extracurricular activities. I don't think it's fair that the operational budget is supporting one pathway for students and not supporting all pathways for
Do the
students.
music people pay a fee to be in the music program?
Yeah, your music program
Is
is
it the
in-
same as athletic? How much,
No.
like if I was in the drama club or the music club, do they pay a fee like the
Well,
athletes?
the question would be whether or not you have approved fees.
Right, do we have them for the music and the drama and things like
Music,
that?
you know that the parents have to pay
Well, that's why I'm asking the question, do they? does the
like
music-
thousands.
Is anyone here in the
Right.
music
It's like
program?
They do
2,500.
their own
Right.
fundraising.
Right, they're not charging a
It's
fee like
not
an
They,
actually
it
a fee.
depends on the activity that they're doing. They can come through the school, but it's also with cheerleading.
Is self-sustaining.
Cheerleading and the
Drama
music
club.
program,
So-
they can do some of their own fundraising.
So let's just separate a couple of things.
Yeah.
Sports programs are funded by your budget.
Mhm.
All right. And primarily, when you look at the athletic department budget, it's made up of three things. It's made up of the cost of your coaches' salaries, it's made up of transportation, of which you all said it probably because we have our own buses to some degree, and it's referees. Those are the big pieces of it. Anywhere along the line that a particular sport gets supported by an outside group, example, ice hockey. We don't have it here, but in many districts, the cost of ice time for ice hockey is so much such that it could not be totally funded. So there's a group, Friends of Hockey, who raise money. That money should come as a donation that the school committee accepts so that you know what the real cost of that sport would be and know that it's offset by that. In the case of your activities that are separate from sports, you should have approved fees for different things. Whether or not you've approved the fees for all of the participation in all of the music programs is something that I'm, not privy to because I haven't been here long enough to know that. Based on some discussions with a few parents, I don't believe you do. I believe there are some
No.
additional charges. So I would say for us to be able to tell you how much it costs to participate is different, because if you have not approved those, then you would not know what those costs would be to run these programs. I anticipate the quality and the level of the programs that we have in performing arts is such that I would not think that it would ever be covered, nor I'm not sure that it should be because of some of the concerns you
Right.
raise, and I don't think they're concerns. They're how do you balance that? How is one activity more important than another? So you have lots of parent groups who over the years have helped to support those programs, and I have said to them, mainly in the case of the foundation that raises the money for music, because they've met with me, it's important for the school committee to know, you need to bring forward, all of those, the amount of money you raise and what you would earmark it for so that the school committee could accept that, should accept that, because that's their job. So I'm sure we pay for stipends for some additional people to come in and work with our students
we
throughout
do.
the year, and I'm sure there are charges for all of that that have to be then assumed by the parents. So that's something that I'm not sure, because I don't have the history of whether or not that has happened. But I've encouraged them, because I know how much they work and how hard they work to support that program. And it's important for you as a school committee and for them to get recognition, and for you to also know, if someone were to say, because in some instances, there are a community who think that all of this happens because you have that in your budget, and it's important that they recognize that that is not the case, and oftentimes it's not the case in sports, in particular with some sports that are extremely expensive to run that program. Your fees don't anywhere cover athletic costs, the athletic department budget. They offset it, gate receipts offset it, and fees offset it. This is a, I think, unusual instance in that, and I think Sean certainly has been an athletic director long enough, but my experience has been that I doubt that this type of an entry fee is typical of most entry fees. And as he and I discussed, you know, it's important for this experience. You would have hoped that you could have sold more tickets. We did not know going in that we'd be playing at 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning, because we probably would have thought differently about doing this. You know, the chances of getting people there, leaving on a Sunday morning early to watch people play, and it came right after Christmas or around that time, so I think there was a confluence of things that impacted that, and you know, it's a lesson that you probably learn.
Kaylee wants to
Oh,
say
and
something.
I wanted to make sure that they're recognized for it, but all of the basketball members of their team in the cafeteria every lunch, they said we're selling tickets, like come to us any lunch after school, and then on the announcements in the
So
morning.
they were
all-
trying
Yeah, they
and-
were advocating
Once we
it.
committed to it, I mean, we committed to it,
Yeah.
you know,
So
good,
they were
bad, and different,
definitely
and I think they
in
were
class,
trying to sell
yeah.
tickets. I agree with you, I think it shouldn't be charged to athletic supplies, it should be charged probably more appropriately to the revolving.
So what's your recommendation, Rich, with the fee, the 6,000? What did you say?
I think it
Again.
makes sense that we, at a minimum, offset to the revolving account whatever tickets were sold, and Mr. Burke and I can go over that accounting, and then depending on school committee's, you know, desire, we can move the entire expense to the revolving.
Okay, and that's your recommendation to move it, the entire?
My recommendation actually is to offset just from the ticket sales that we received.
Okay.
But, again, the school committee can
I'm gonna
direct me.
make a motion that we apply the ticket money to offset the general fund, and the general fund picks up the difference.
Okay?
Because
Do I
when
have
the
a-
item comes out the same, it's gonna
Right,
come to us in June,
right.
they don't have the money.
I think
so
it's a
it
more
pays-
appropriate
Yeah.
fund to take it from. not
Do I have a
supplies.
second on that?
Second.
Okay, any more discussion? Okay, seeing none, all
Can I
in
have a
favor?
clarification?
Oh, go ahead.
The general fund is not the revolving account.
No,
Correct. It is not the revolving account.
right now it's being charged to the
Right.
general fund entirely, 3,200, that will come back to us, and the other 3,200 would stay on that bond, so to
Right,
speak.
right.
You're basing your motion on the premise that they would need to come back and ask for more money later on in the year.
They
What
might.
if they don't?
Might.
Well, then it carries over to next year.
I'm thinking that the revolving fund is a more appropriate place to take
I'm
the
going by
money
the
from.
finance director, I figure he knows best, that's why I'm making my motion. That's why I went along with his motion, his suggestion.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Then? What types of funds are we talking about are available in the revolving fund? I don't need an exact number, but are we talking that there's a small amount of money available in the revolving fund? Or it's a,
The combined between the athletic receipts and the athletic summer programs that run, I believe the closing balance was north of $100,000. So offsetting it to the revolving fund certainly is able to be done. However, the reason that I gave the recommendation that I did is that the fees that are generated from there, the gate receipts that are generated from there, we're trying to save a little bit each and every year in there to ultimately replace a turf field that's going to cost, you know, around $500,000 or so. So my thought is my recommendation rather, was to offset that to the sales that were generated for now. And then at the end of the year, depending on where the athletic budget is, as we do each and every year, we'll look at it and say, okay, we may need to move some additional expenses to the revolving account. All depends on where athletics ends up.
can I ask another question? What do you use the revolving fund for besides that specific thing?
It's used for that.
Just that?
To offset expenses.
At the end of the year, it's
Yep.
not something that's.
Cannot be used, has to be used to offset sports related.
Sports.
Like a
Sure, but if
referendum.
you knew
Right.
that you were going to have like a specific coach come every year, I don't know, like an athletic god come in and coach the football team or something like that, you know, no, that's not.
No, that
Because
comes out of
you've
our.
already approved.
I know, I'm just trying to figure out, is there a use for that besides the end of the year?
But throughout the year, it pays for the referees for football games, it pays for the coach's salary, it pays for transportation if you have to hire an extra bus. So it's used during the year, it's not
those
kept.
are the
on-
things.
Those are what it's
It
for.
offsets the expenses of the account.
Running the program.
And quite frankly, with
It's
all
our
due
money
respect to
anyway.
Mr. Burke, if a bad decision was made,
Yeah.
his budget should suffer for that little bit of bad decision, just like anybody else who's in charge of budgets.
But you can't
But-
tell, I'll tell you, you really didn't know it was going to be a bad decision, because you really didn't know when this game was going to be played.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's the chance you took. And I don't blame you for that, because it's something that, you know, it's a one-time thing that the kids
And it
would
was
like to
something, I
do.
think- Was this the
and-
first time
Yeah.
that you had participated in this particular tournament?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it wasn't
And
like
it
we've
was
been doing
tried,
this
yeah,
for years and we
you
know it's
know,
worked well.
so-
So
And
it
the
wasn't
kids
something-
did try to sell, they didn't do it, it was probably the wrong time of year and whatever. But, so we have a motion on the floor, any more discussion before we take a vote?
I think my hang-up is really questioning whether, not whether the decision was right or not, it's just that I'm just thinking about what Ms. Rabbit said about extracurricular activities and like the music program or the arts program, and where would they charge their entrance fees to?
Well, they don't have.
Yeah, they
They
don't,
don't.
yeah.
Right. So they wouldn't have that. Typically, you would have, assuming a line item for tournaments
Okay.
in your budget, but they wouldn't have
Yeah.
that. In the case of your music department, they certainly have fees, competition fees, and those are not part of, is my understanding of the music department's budget, because it probably covers instructional supplies, textbooks, things like that, and would not cover that unless there was an extraordinary cost.
Right.
We can't equalize all the extracurricular activities, because they're all different, they all cost
Well, they're
different
not
amounts.
equivalent to
Of
sports.
sports.
Sports are part of your
Yeah.
budget, and you
Right.
fund,
Yeah.
obviously through stipends, you fund
Right.
your activities. You fund it through the fact that you pay for someone to oversee it, if that's a stipend. But very rarely do you set aside, I'm not really, not, like, I can tell you a few instances where you would set aside some funds, particularly at the secondary level. You might, for example, be starting a robotics club or something in a school district, and you fund the advisor position for that, and then you also, for the first year, have seed money, or you have parents raise seed money, which they then come forward as a donation to the school committee. After that, what are you gonna do? Oftentimes, the same thing happens in sports when a new sport, a group of parents come forward and say, we'd like to have ice hockey, and we like a girls' team. So typically, what you do is to say to them, you need to show us that you're self-funding for a number of years, and then the school committee will consider that. I'm sure you've probably done something like that in the past. So they are two different things. I think now it's a matter of where do we take that? What's the most appropriate place to take that, out of the general fund or out of the athletic revolving?
And do we have a tournament line item in our budget?
It's all factored into Mr. Burke's budget when he does it.
Yeah. I'm sure there's entry fees or whatever it's called. I'm not sure what line it is, Kathy, that actually covers
Okay.
it, but I would assume there's something in there. Generally, there is.
Given the large sum of money that this tournament would have did cost as a result of not selling the tickets, I know that this is the first time we've done this one, but do you typically have a backup fund or an insurance policy, so to speak, in your budget for these types of things in case you don't sell the amount of tickets that you need to? I mean, because it's a huge hit to the budget.
It is, and I don't have that, I don't necessarily have that in the budget that I prepare and I submit. Usually, when any department submits a budget, it's looked at and, things are cut. I think if I've never even thought of it, but my guess right now is if I put in, a line item that said that this is, in case, that would be the first thing cut.
So, I have a couple things. In budget and finance, we have tried to inquire and get information regarding the cost of athletics. And I think Dr. Nash is making a very good point that we, as a committee, probably are not as fully informed as we could be about the expenses that these various programs cost us. So things like music, things like athletics, those have not been supplied to us in the past. And I think that if any sport has a traditional calendar that has X amount of games, X amount of referees, coaches, assistants, that you have an idea of estimating what that sport costs for the year. I guess I'm more, wanting to have that information presented to us as a committee so that we become more educated about this particular topic, that we're discussing it in budget and finance, that we're discussing it here as a school committee. But I guess I'm more bothered that this, as a new adventure for our students, was not brought to the school committee for approval. So the tournament itself wasn't brought here for approval. As we approve our students to go off on, you know, a competition for other elements, this was not brought before us so that we could have looked at the fact that this is a cost that could be coming and impacting our budget, an unanticipated cost that we did not plan for. We're having a lot of conversations these days about expenses that need to be addressed, and we're running, you know, we're running into some concerns about money. So $6,400 for us right now is coming on the tail of a lot of other things that we're spending money on. So it is a little bit of a concern. We can't, you know, we can't correct the fact that it happened. I think we can correct how we're informed about the process and maybe the decision-making on participating on things that we haven't budgeted for in the event that we do have to pick up that expense.
I just want to say, I'm not micromanaging the sports teams. If they have 10 football games, they know that costs X amount of
Right.
money, and that's their job. It's not our, I don't go to the math department where I taught for 25 years and say, how much are you spending on the whiteboards, how much you're spending on chalk. That's not our
No.
job to micromanage. His job is to present the budget. If you have questions, ask him. He knows the budget. This was a nice thing for the kids. If this had been successful, we would have made money if we sold more than 400 tickets, right? Technically, we could have made money, probably.
We set the ticket prices to break even.
Okay.
And
So
we've
we're-
never approved tournaments.
My kid
We
went to
leave
Reggie
this
Lewis every year.
to
We
the
never got
athletic
approval on that.
department. Right.
So,
my
A
question-
tournament never came, and
That's the
I
thing.
don't
So
approve of it.
I'm not debating the issue about micromanaging the program. I'm debating the issue of the fact that we were not informed of what the budget was for the athletic department.
It's in,
So that
it
we
must
could have
be
made.
there. It's in our
It's-
budget.
But it's a line item. I was told it was supplies. I was not told that it was tournaments. I was not told that it was referees. So I'm asking for clarification. I'm asking for information so that I, as a school committee member, can be more informed to the process when we're discussing budget. So I'm not looking to micromanage the sports or what the sports are, but as the representative for the town of Charlton, for the fiscal spending of the district, it's my job to be informed as to what those numbers are. That's what I'm asking for.
Well, I know what it's for because I've asked them, you think supplies is the only thing that goes into the athletic budget?
That's
Who pays
what
for the reps?
that's what was answered to me when I asked the question.
So you found out?
Well, I'm finding out now, and I'm not happy with the fact that I'm not aware of the full,
I'd
the
like to
full
move the
accounting
question,
of it.
Mrs. O'Connor, I'd like to
Okay.
move the question.
And I just want to say one thing. I don't think we should approve any tournaments. That's the athletic department. We're going to move the question and take a vote, okay? All in favor of Mr. Matthews' recommendation, and I'm going to vote for him.
Yeah, so take
Repeat it
3,200
again.
with the
We-
receipts.
My proposal, or my recommendation to the committee is that we offset whatever receipt, the expense of the $6,400 by whatever tickets were ultimately sold and deposited into the athletic revolving account. And the balance remain in the general fund until, at least, until the end of the year, where we have a final accounting on all expenses.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, all opposed? Okay, so it's 5-2, right?
I just want to throw one other thing. We approved the music bands because they're usually leaving on school time and going over the weekend. When my kid went to Reggie Lewis on a Saturday morning, we didn't have to give approval for that because it was a non-school missing day. There was no money involved. That was the way it goes. I'm not getting into this, every single thing they want to do, we have to approve. I don't think that is our job. That's what the finance committee does, I mean, the finance director, that's what the budget is for. I'm not about to micromanage any of these departments. That's the last thing I'll say about it.
We'll agree to disagree, Mrs.
That's right, we
Yeah.
always do.
I think probably, if I could add, I think just giving some more level of detail when we present the athletic budget. I don't know, I'm not being here again, and I haven't looked at last year's budget, but maybe that would be helpful. Because again, we know where the chief costs are. They are in transportation, the stipends that you pay for all of your coaches, and it's for referees. That's primarily the three big areas. And in some sport, uniforms, instructionals, that's minimal, but yeah, we can give you a little bit more if you'd like. I'll look and see what we have.
presented with a budget for athletics.
Oh, okay.
And I'm going to keep him here. I'll move up D, the
Okay.
athletic director's report.
So I want to thank Dr. Nash for inviting me today. I think I've actually never addressed the school committee unless I was asking for something. And now I'm not asking for anything, so I'm a little bit more at ease. I just want to tell you a little bit about the program and some of the things that we do. I'm going to break it down into three parts. This won't be a long presentation, don't worry, but I'll break it down into three parts. First will be, excuse me, what do we do, what do we offer? Next, who do we serve? And finally, I'll get to brag a little bit about the great things that are going on in Shepherd Hill Athletics. So first, what do we do and what do we offer? So you can see that first or second slide there. In the fall, we offer unified basketball, first time this year. I'll get into that a little bit more later. Boys and girls soccer at all three levels. Boys and girls cross country, field hockey, volleyball, golf, football, cheerleading, fall cheerleading. Okay. In the winter is our small season in terms of offerings and number of athletes. We have a cooperative program with Auburn. We don't have a hockey team here, but Auburn does, and they struggle with numbers, so there's a couple other schools that they co-op with, and our kids are allowed to play for Auburn hockey. I think it's our 5th year doing it, and each year we get about maybe up to 10 boys and up to 5 girls who go to Auburn and play hockey. It's a great opportunity. We have a lot of ponds, a lot of lakes and ponds in Dudley and Charlton. A lot of kids grow up playing pond hockey, but there were really no youth programs here, and we didn't have a program to offer them here, so we're very grateful to Auburn. We have boys and girls basketball, all three levels. Boys and girls indoor track, varsity wrestling, and again, varsity and JV winter cheering. Now, our spring sports offerings, boys and girls lacrosse, which is becoming more and more popular these days, boys and girls track and field, baseball, softball, and boys and girls tennis at the varsity level. So this talks a little bit about our Shepherd Hill Sports Academy. It's like our 4th season. We have fall, winter, spring, and this is what we do in the summer. Since 2012, we have offered a curriculum of clinics to student athletes from grades, or not student athletes, but to students from grades 2 through 8. There's a whole number of things that we have offered, including soccer, baseball, basketball, arts and crafts, adventure course, golf, tennis, and the list goes on. And we don't necessarily offer all of those every year, but those are some of the ones that we do and have offered. One of the things one of the reasons that we started this back in 2012 is that athletics does very little fundraising. And to the best of my knowledge, it was designed that way because so many other programs in the school have to fundraise, and a lot of their, each class does their fundraising, and the student council, and there's very few businesses in the towns, so to have 40 teams going out and asking for donations every year wasn't something that historically the school committee and the administration and the building administration wanted us to do. So we did very little fundraising, but this is really our main source of fundraising. We don't pay for transportation, officials, uniforms, or coaches' salaries with it. These are enhancements. We've done some great things and bought things that have benefited our programs tremendously, including a batting cage, which we have just purchased, coach player software, an AED for our athletic trainer, different training supplies and items, travel enhancements, a volleyball machine, and a tennis machine, and there are others, but that's just a few of the things, and it has been very, very helpful to us. Mark Kelly is the director, and our sports coaches are the director or coordinator of each clinic, and then they hire student athletes to be the student coaches, and they all do a great job with the kids. Middle school athletics. This is not under my direction. Each middle school has its own athletic coordinator. In Dudley, it's Steve Ide, and in Charlton, it's Joe Rogalski. But I figured I'd shout out to them and let you know what programs are offered in the middle schools. So they have boys and girls cross country, boys and girls soccer, boys and girls basketball, and baseball and softball are offered at both middle schools. So the next section here is who we serve. I'm going to start with the current season that we're in now. We have 195 athletes, 95 of whom are females and 100 males. Makes up 18% of our enrollment, which is about 1,100 kids. We'll go back to this most recent fall season. We had 171 female athletes, 167 male athletes, which made up 31% of our population. And then obviously we haven't had spring yet, but I'll go back to last spring. And 127 female athletes and 165 male athletes makes up 26% of this year's population. It's a total of 825 roster spots. Doesn't necessarily mean 825 students participated because some of them do more than one sport, but it's 825 roster spots. And I didn't do that calculation, but my guess is there's pushing 600 students who took up those roster spots. Especially today when we have more and more students specializing in playing one sport year-round. I don't think that that's a unreasonable guess. Now, finally, the third section here, I get to brag a little bit about some of the great things that we've done in the last few months. You see here that our girls cross-country team, the Midwatch A league champions. Almost all of our teams are in the Midwatch A, which is basically, the highest, most competitive programs and teams in Central Mass. So they're the Midwatch A league champions, the District E or Central Mass champions, and they came in 8th in the district meet as a team. Also, Rebecca James was the individual Central Mass champion. Next, we're talking a little bit about unified sports, which is new this year. unified teams take special needs students, student athletes, and regular ed student athletes, and they work together, and they're called partners. This basketball season, they had 1 or 2 practices a week and 1 or 2 games per week. And it was just, it was a great experience. All the players, coaches, parents, fans, everybody is rooting for both teams. Anytime anybody from either team scores, the place erupts. It's really something. And if you can get to one of the unified contests that we have here, I know you would be proud.
Can I just ask, that interplay or did other schools?
Yes.
Other schools or just?
Yes, other schools.
Okay. Are there many other schools that have that?
Yeah, I think there's probably
Shrewsbury.
15 or 20 teams in
Good.
Central Mass.
Oh, really? Good.
Sure. I'm most proud of these next 2 slides. So each season, each sport, the coaches get together and they elect their individual all-stars. They also elect the sportsmanship award winner for that sport for the mid-watch. And our field hockey teams, field hockey teams and our girls soccer teams were awarded the sportsmanship awards this past fall. Also this past fall, the MIAA has these certificates, award certificates that they give out or that we order through them and are given out for excellence in the classroom by student athletes. And I'm very proud to say that this past fall, every one of our teams received either a gold or a silver academic award certificate. And you can see there across, I'm not going to name them all, but you can see all the schools there, all the teams there that won the gold certificate in the top level, and the teams that won the silver certificates on the lower level. And the overall GPA of all fall athletes was 3.39. Next, senior Drew Montigny was the MIAA Student Athlete of the Month. Mr. Kelly had submitted an application with Drew's information, and things get submitted by all I can't say all schools in the state have the opportunity to submit these applications each month. And for the month of October, Drew Montigny was the MIAA Student of the Month. The next slide there is a picture of our basketball coaches. And the head coach, Mike Burns, was awarded the Central Mass Basketball Coach of the Year from last year. And I put it in here because it was only about a month ago that we went to the Hogan Center at Holy Cross to the Coaching Association's Hall of Fame banquet, the annual Hall of Fame banquet, and he was awarded his plaque for the Coach of the Year at that time. We have 2 students this past fall who signed national letters of intent, which means that they agreed to go to a college and play a particular sport for them for a scholarship. First, we have Ingrid Lindstrom, who's a NCAA Division II volleyball at Franklin Pierce. And second, Rebecca James is going to UMass Amherst for a Division I cross country and track. Both of those students had NLI signing events here in the library, surrounded by their friends and family and teammates and coaches. We had a little bit of press here, and they signed the paperwork here in the library. The next 2 slides, I guess I never did that. The next 2 slides, I'll just let you take a look at them. Those are all the student athletes from the fall who were awarded various all-star awards, whether it was from Midwatch or from Central Mass, from their particular sport. some also from the state. And that's it. And again, thank you very much for letting me brag a little bit.
Any questions for Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I just have a comment, Mr. Burke. My 6-year-old attended your summer program this summer, and it was extremely hot.
Mhm.
And your staff did such a nice job making sure that the kids were comfortable
Oh, good.
and well taken care of, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, good. I will pass that on.
Yes.
Like I said, Coach Kelly's the director, and he does an outstanding job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all you do.
Could I ask you that?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. I understand that there's like a ski team at the middle school in Charlton. Do you guys have anything like that here?
Yeah, we have a ski and snowboard club that is, they're there right now, actually. They go on Wednesdays. For the weeks between Christmas vacation and February vacation, every Wednesday they go to Wachusett. It's not
They don't race.
It's not under the umbrella of athletics. It's a club.
It's a club.
They get on a bus and they go and have fun and ski for the afternoon.
The two middle schools and the high school. Yeah. May I make just one comment? So you certainly can understand the role that an athletic director plays. But I think it's important for you, and I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you, that Mr. Burke's primary role is a teacher. He is a .6 teacher, and he only is an athletic director as .4, which is very unusual for a district this size, the number of students. And you probably hear us draw some of those comparisons when we do the dot comparison as we get into budget season. But, so I know the role that the AD plays, particularly when spring comes, and as much as you want baseball and softball to start, it's usually a rainy spring, and you are rearranging every single contest for the first month of April. I think that was the case last year. So I think it's important to recognize that his primary role is a teacher first. And, yeah, so I thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, student rep report, Kaylee.
All right, so you guys took some of the words out of my mouth. Ski club, ski club started last week, January 2nd, and like Dr. Nash said, both middle schools go. And they come back, they leave right after school on some nice coach buses. They have so much fun. They go to the lodge, they hang out, ski or snowboard, and then they come back. They leave about 8 o'clock, and 8:45 they get picked up from the schools. And then, like we discussed earlier, boys basketball played at TD Garden on Sunday versus Northbridge, and they had a great time over there. And the basketball has been having a little bit of a rough season, so it was definitely something that the boys needed to use to boost up their spirits during that hard time, just because they have been having a little bit of a struggle and their fan base has been kind of low lately. And then we also had Brian Santos Ramos. He is second in the 50-meter dash in the United States, and he was the champion in the Hispanic Games. He's in my grade. He's a junior this year. And then the drama club is going to have the incomplete life of Molly and the random death of Denholtz, and that's going to be on January 25th and 26th. We have at the high school midterms coming up this upcoming week, and then report cards will be out the 25th of January. And show choir, like always, being busy. On February 1st and 2nd, they'll be hosting the Central Mass Show Choir Festival, which they will showcase some of their music in. And then band was also able to raise $2.4 thousand for their new Adams xylophone that they were working really hard for. And then at Mason Road, the kindergarten concert is going to be on January 15th, and it's going to be hosted at Dudley Middle School. Heritage just started their After the Bell program yesterday, and they have items like cooking, computer classes that are available up until, I think it's about 3:30 or 4:30 that they can do after school with the designated teacher for that. And Dudley Middle is starting their first annual shoe drive called Souls for Souls, and it's with the John Pear Be Better group. And then Dudley first and second grader Cub Scouts, they raised over 350 items to the local food pantry. And the teachers up at Shepherd Hill had an ugly sweater competition. And I just wanted to clarify earlier, it seemed like a concern for some of the members on school committee. When we're talking about sports, music programs, arts programs, you're comparing apples and oranges at the end of the day. But they're fruit, and who doesn't like fruit? We love them all. And I think high school is different for everyone. You know, you have some good days, you have some bad days. But I just wanted it to be known that ever since I've been in middle school and we've had like the various programs, I've gone to basketball games, and at halftime I go over and I go to the music program the next. And all programs are supported widely by all students. And so you're never having just the basketball team or show choir. It's never just this one's better, this one's better. It's always a level playing field for the students. We all support each other. And it might not sound like the truth. I mean, high school is different for everyone, like I said, but you walk in the hallways and things are so different. Like, we're a big family. That's all I can say about that. Yes, that's at the end of the day, we all love seeing our friends play, perform, showcasing their work at whatever museum they're at. And it's awesome just to see how different that we can all be. And so that's all I have for today.
Thank you.
And I hope you guys all had a good
Kaylee.
New Year.
Yes, thank you so much. That brings us, no, thank you so much. Contribute anytime you want, Kaylee. Citizens Forum, anyone would like to come up to speak with us? All right, that brings us to communications. Dr. Nash?
I do.
Oh, good.
I would like to read a letter. This is a notification. While it's almost a little more than a year in advance, I think it's important to read. This is a official letter of notification from Gerald Millett, who will be retiring a year from this coming June. And so I'd like to read this. This is my official notification to you and my company that my last day of work at Shepherd Hill will be June 30th, 2020. On that day, I plan to retire. I'm excited about my impending retirement, but wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of you for all of the opportunities that I have experienced working for Shepherd Hill and the Dudley-Charlton Regional School District. I have genuinely enjoyed my employment as the maintenance director and will miss you and my coworkers when my retirement day comes. Please let me know what I can do to help you with the transition of my work to another employee. I plan to work right up until my retirement date and will be happy to help you make a smooth transition. I'll even help you find an employee to replace me if that is the decision that you make. Again, I've truly enjoyed working at Shepherd Hill Regional High School and will miss my coworkers and our workplace a great deal. I wish you nothing but the best for the future. And then the rest of it goes on to say who we'll be meeting with. Sincerely, Gerald N. Millett.
He's been a dedicated
Absolutely.
employee for years,
Right.
and we will miss
Yeah,
him.
he did a
So
wonderful job.
He did a
That's why the
real good
buildings
job.
look so nice.
So we will send him an official letter accepting his retirement, but I wanted you to
Thank you.
be aware of it. I also, some good news that I received via communication email from the Dudley Elementary School principal, Diane Siebold, who is here this evening, saying that DES found out last Friday that they are the proud recipients of 2 of the cultural grants from Dudley. One was sought by Cindy Rawson, who is our art teacher, and that will allow our 4th graders to visit the Worcester Art Museum this winter, spring. The second grant is a local artist who also is a parent of one of our 3rd graders, will complete an art residency at DES and will culminate by working and developing and leading a large painting mural display that will be in the hallway leading to the cafeteria. So I just want to congratulate those individuals and certainly the principal for those nice cultural grants that you have received. That was good. Thank you. And then the final communication is after the date, but I did want to bring this up because I know that we sent this out to you, to the members of the Charlton board members, because this was forwarded to us last Thursday by the administrative assistant to the town administrator, Robin Craver. inviting us, along with all of the other boards, departments, commissions, committee members, to attend a meeting on this past Tuesday, yesterday, I believe. Am I- Yes, losing track of time. To share, I think, a variety of thoughts, series of questions, a variety of thoughts regarding what's working and not working so well. So I'd like to, I wasn't able to attend, but I know that I think some of our members may have been able to attend. So I'd like to see if maybe Stephanie, Mrs. Reed may want to make some comments about this in communication.
That meeting ended up being a board meeting and council meeting of the different things that are going on in Charlton. They basically told what had happened this past year and what they were going to be doing this year. It wasn't so much, it was more of what they've been able to do rather than what the invitation had said. But it was, Peter Durant and Representative Frost was there, and, you know, that was positive. But it really, you know, we're just, yeah, but it was good. I mean, but it was more just what's going on, not so much what could happen together, so. But, yeah. And then we did talk about getting together for all the towns, the 2 towns and us for the finance.
I think that's something that typically happens, I've been told, in March or so.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Was it interactive? Did you get to speak, or was it?
Oh, yes, I spoke. What I said was that we were in the middle of superintendent search and coming into budget season. But I mean, Todd from Environmental talked about the permit that we need for storm drainage. The Cultural Council talked about concerts that they're trying to get for the green. The Council of Aging talked about salaries that they were trying to get overseen. Mrs. Craver talked about the gas tax that we're trying to get Representative Frost and Durant to bring to the table. Mr. LaFleche was there from Bay Path, and he talked about what was going on there. Peter Borio was there for the water and sewer. The new IT guy, his first name is Jeff. I don't know what his last name was, but talked about the website and how the town is going to have a new website with everybody. So if we have any information that we want to put on there to get it in. Then the recreation was the skate park, recycling committee. Kathleen Walker talked about Old Home Day. Earth Day was talked about. John Sanborn talked about the Board of Health and landfills and the well testing. And the planning board talks about hiring a new planning director, and that there's 40 projects that are going under, that they're looking to put out. And then Stefan talked about the library and how wonderful it is, and it is. And then Mr. McGrath and Deb Noble just talked about the different things that are coming into Charlton, like the new stop signs. And I mean, it wasn't anything put forth, like, you know, like, I mean, it was more of what's going on and what's happening and that sort of thing. Nothing, like I said, like the invitation.
Not a brainstorming session.
No, not at all.
Can I ask a question? You mentioned that Peter Boyer said something about pump stations that were going to impact water delivery to the schools?
Oh, yes, that's right. Sorry. They had just been approved to seek out bids for water pump stations, which, once that gets rolling and in, that'll be able to bring water to CMS, Heritage, and Bay Path. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it's soon. And that's it.
Okay, does that conclude the communications?
It does.
Dr. Nash? How about our members? Do we have any communications? And I don't, so we'll move right along to superintendent's report, special topics report.
Yes.
Thank you. You have in your packet the special topic this evening that I'd like to talk about, have some discussion input from the committee, is MSBA's opening up of the submittal for statements of interest. So let me hand out something that I had said that would be in your packet. This is the letter that response from MSBA last year when the former superintendent and obviously had submitted an SOI under the Accelerated Repair Program. By way of background, the window for beginning to submit either an Accelerated Repair Program SOI Statement of Interest or a core program statement of interest has just opened up, and the period for which it will close will be sometime in the spring for core program. In the past, and you have correspondence from last year, I believe, and you could probably recall better than I could, those of you who've had the history, that there were a number of instances, a number of years where the district has submitted statements of interest primarily for Accelerated Repair Program. Accelerated Repair Program generally is different from a core program, SOI. The biggest difference is in a core program SOI, you are submitting it either for renovations/additions, major renovations, additions, not covered by the Accelerated Repair Program, which is roofs, windows, boilers, doors, and/or a new building. In the past, last year, you submitted an Accelerated Repair Program, and you have the letter that outlines that you were not accepted into the program, if you will. There's a whole series of things that happen. As you know, the amount of money that MSBA has is determined year to year by a sales tax amount, and every year numerous school districts submit either an Accelerated Repair Program, SOI, or a core program. What I am coming forward this evening is to ask the committee what consideration you may have for submitting either one of those. My recommendation would be simply based on the fact that reading this letter, that in all likelihood submitting another Accelerated Repair Program would end up with the same results. And you can read partly some of those chief reasons being around the age, if you will, of our roof and some of the other things that were submitted. So that if the committee considers and wishes us to move forward and submit a statement of interest, that statement of interest be submitted under the core program SOI. Now, the core program SOI itself, I've given you a brief kind of outline of that. Primarily looks at the need for either additions, renovations, or a new building. I would add the caveat that if one submits, if a school district does that, while a community of stakeholders may think that we should renovate the building, that is not the decision that you have. That decision is the decision that MSBA would have in the course of its study as to whether or not you would get a renovation or a new building. We're not talking about additions. That also is their decision. So it's not as simple, I know in many districts, initially one thinks that you can, repair a building, and maybe you could renovate a building, or you could add an addition, we would be all right. It really is a series of studies and teams that come out and make that decision whether or not they would support it, and thus you would get whatever the funding percentage would be for that. You certainly can build your own building yourself and add your own additions yourself, but you would be bearing the entire cost of that. So I just wanted to point that out. With respect to how you get accepted into the core program, The information that's provided in that overview document outlines the 4 areas. 2 of those areas include school ratings. I went out and I didn't make you copies of this, but you certainly can look at this. This is the 2016 school survey report. 2 of those areas that all school districts are rated on across the Commonwealth are building condition and general environment. And I provided for you the rating for Shepherd Hill Regional High School, which is the priority area, meaning the building in the district that you had submitted previously an SOI on. With respect to the rating standard, if you will, it's a 1 to 4 rating. The condition of our building was rated as a 2, and the general environment was rated as a 1. I did provide for you that for purposes of comparison, 52% of all school buildings in the state received the rating of 2 on general condition, building condition, and 82% received a rating of 1 on environment. So while we look at those and say, well, does that get us to where we need to be? If you look at the whole scheme of things and all of the buildings that were evaluated or rated, which is all of the buildings in the state, all of the school buildings in the state, you can see that you're in 82% got the same as you. So I don't know whether that factor, how that weighs in, and whether that has an equal weight to the other 2 factors that they look at. In addition to those 2 factors, they look at any prior activity that you've had. For example, if you've been submitting SOIs on a regular basis, I'm certainly sure that eventually you rise to the top, again, dependent on who.
I don't think so.
One would think. Well,
If they won't give us
you know,
the accelerated.
Remember that part of that was because they pushed out the window of years on that. So the question would be, how many times have you submitted a core program, and how many times has that been rejected? And again, on a year-to-year basis, it's based on the amount of money that MSBA has available and the amount of projects the amount of SOIs that are submitted, and then how many can they fund. And they generally tend to I can tell you my perception is that they generally tend to stagger that among urban school districts, suburban school districts, statewide across the state. Obviously, there's some political interest, I am sure, that motivates some things a little bit stronger than others, I would say. So there are a number of things that have to happen. As you know, I'm sure you probably have had a senior study conducted here where a team of people come out and look at your building, really, take a really strong look at what some of the things we've talked about in what would need to happen in capital planning, the structural engineer, the electrical engineer to come out and really see the, if you will, the infrastructure. While a building looks wonderful because the condition our custodians maintain our buildings marvelously, we still have copper pipes, and those pipes are getting pretty thin, as Jerry will tell me all the time, and we've repair those on a regular basis. So those are things that can be part of that visit. The process would be such that what I'm looking for this evening is not the official vote, because that would happen if this evening the committee decides that we should submit an SOI. We would come back to you prior to the submission deadline, which is April 12th, so it would probably be prior to the April 10th school committee meeting, or it could be at that meeting. We would bring you the SOI that we are submitting, a hard copy of that, so you could see that. And then you will have to take this formal vote with the wording as exact as MSBA now provides it, unlike years ago, where basically you didn't have to do all of this. But there's a lot of stuff, as you probably already know, in submitting it, electronic signatures and all of that. So what I'm really looking for this evening is a sense of direction from the committee. Would you like us to proceed? Would you like us to proceed and submit an SOI? And would you like us to proceed and submit an SOI for a core program?
Or the accelerated.
Or the accelerated, yes. Yeah.
What's the committee's wishes?
Is there a downside to submitting a request for either one of them?
The downside that I would see would be you probably would get the same results as you got last year with the accelerated program, repair program, because of our age. Is that accurate?
Right, with the requirement being 25 years and our roof not being 25 years yet, I can't imagine, unless they change that criteria back to, previous years, I can't imagine that we'd be accepted.
And I can't imagine us getting into the core program. When you look at this school, they're going to say, I don't think they need a new school when they compare it with other schools.
Typically, if I could just add, and going back to your question, typically in the accelerated repair, school districts will submit and they'll have roof, they'll have boilers, and they'll have windows. See, you've replaced windows, so it becomes less of an urgency, if you will, to some degree. If you have all of those categories in your building, then it tends to rise. This would be, again, my impression, but it tends to have a little bit more weight. So where you've done the windows and your cost now is for maybe the roof or a boiler, then that may not appear to be as urgent as some other districts in that year, in that window of time that you submit. So,
Can I ask a question? I think it's unlikely that due to the excellent maintenance that we do in our buildings, that we'll rise to the level for either. I think if I were to do one over the other, I would submit for the core program, only because I think the true need is going to be a new high school, and it might take us another 5, 6, or 7 years of submitting before we finally rise to the top. But if that truly is what the need is, and we can't qualify for any type of repair money, then I think we should submit for a core. But is there a building in the district that would garner greater attention versus the high school if we were to switch which building we were submitting for?
With the middle schools, despite their need being well short of the 25 years for the roof, I'm not sure that the windows, doors, and boilers at those sister facilities really would excite interest or be needed to be replaced at this point in time. In terms of the 4 elementary schools, again, there isn't an outcry for roof replacement at any necessarily. Repairs, yes. But that's something that we can take a look at and get back to the committee on, specifically on the windows and doors, and maybe bundling a couple of things together.
I know that our elementary buildings are the oldest buildings that we have in the district. I mean, Charlton Elementary is over 50-some-odd years old. So perhaps maybe we need to trade out, but if we were to continue to pursue Shepherd Hill, I think we need to pursue the core program, because I think it's important to not only keep us in the cycle with the state, but I think it's a continuing process of educating our communities that at some point in time there is going to be a need to address Shepherd Hill facility.
Can you apply to the 5 schools in the district if you wanted to? Is there a limit to what you can apply? You only pick
They
one.
call it priority.
Because we had the Charlton Elementary, Scott Cushing, and his came here one day and told about, several years ago, and we
Right.
kind of dropped that, Charlton Elementary.
So
He
you
came
would-
with some, do you remember that? He came with a
Right.
lot of recommendations years ago. So we stopped that.
So we have space issues in our elementary schools as well, but I know that, I don't know that there's been any updates on any major scale to any of the elementary schools with doors and windows.
You typically, you would check off the category of overcrowding, they have a priority list that you would check off, and typically they would ask you to submit documents that would show that you've done either a NESDEC population study or something like that. Years ago, you could submit multiple schools, kind of like luck of the draw.
Yeah, I thought-
We used
I
to,
thought
we used to submit lots of them all at once.
That would be nice.
And now they've changed that. They've really, you prioritize and pick which one. And then, I think to some degree, Mrs. Rabbit is accurate. And after a while, I think you start to you finally,
Yeah, right.
Where people
they,
have-
they hear about you, and they recognize that there is a need. It's just a matter of how that need fits with respect to the other 102 or the other 75 that happen to have submitted at that time. And I do think there is, to some degree, an order to all of this. And I'll leave it at that.
Well, I guess I'll entertain a motion to approve one of the programs. We'll go with the recommendation of the core program for Shepherd Hill. And that's your recommendation, right, Dr.
It
Nash?
is not necessarily a recommendation I wanted to bring forward. I
Right,
mean,
but what would be yours? You thought the accelerated.
I did
that
not
we-
think if one were
It would
going, if we were
work
going to
again.
submit for
Right.
Shepherd Hill,
Right,
I would recommend that we submit the core program, because whether that initially 5 years from now
Right.
becomes a renovation, an addition in renovation, or a new high school, one does not know. But it, if you have not submitted, and again, I don't know the history, as a core program, this may be the time to begin that process. That's all I would
okay. So
say.
we'll see if that goes through.
If I'm correct, we have submitted for the core program previously. I know that we just did, Sandy had pulled up a study for us for budget and finance, that our first submission, when we
Right.
were looking at the capital planning meeting, that our first submission was in 2006, and we've done both core and we've done accelerated repair.
Right.
So we can look for that for a second. The only amendment I would make to the motion is, I don't know whether or not, I would definitely begin preparing a core for Shepherd Hill, but I think we need to go back and look at whether or not we
We
might
don't have
have.
the motion yet, so.
Right, but we
don't
would have a
yeah.
better look at also maybe addressing an elementary school that
So we can
might have
just
raised
say,
to the top.
at this time, approve the core program, and then we'll decide what school later on, okay?
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
about that? Would it give us any negative, maybe you don't know this answer, I acknowledge that, but would it give us a negative, if we're trying to keep our name out there, and we've said Shepherd Hill, Shepherd Hill, Shepherd Hill, Shepherd Hill, and then we submit for Charlton Elementary, although I agree that that's our oldest school and maybe a school that needs that much attention, does it take away from the fact that we said Shepherd Hill for so many years? Is that a negative upon us?
I think that could certainly be a question that someone
good
would
question.
ask. Is it a negative? I don't know if it's a negative.
Well, we've been talking about, as Jamie said, Shepherd Hill, that we,
I think it would probably make some sense over a period of time if you've been submitting for one school in particular and it's moved from an accelerated repair program to a core program. It would suggest to that group that you have had to make some of those repairs that would have been covered under the accelerated repair program, and now you need to move to this because you've either got overcrowding, you've got other, you've got one of those
Right.
7 priority areas that are very different, or you've got some kind of a spurt in growth that happened over a period of time, or you cannot continue to deliver your programs in the same manner because you don't have, a school that provides that, so.
And you
I
can,
don't know.
you can only make one submission from the district.
Yes.
Okay.
so.
Every time that it opens
Yeah.
up, yeah.
So what is the committee's wish? Do they want to just say the core program for now, or specify what school?
I think it makes more sense to go with the core program for Shepherd Hill and keep that name out there.
Okay, so are you going to make the motion?
I make a motion to submit for the core program for Shepherd Hill.
Okay, do I have a second? Okay, discussion.
I just want to say, I don't disagree with that, but I think Mrs. Rabbit brings up a really valid point that the windows haven't been touched at the
Right.
elementary school, which is the reason that I continue to bring up that our air conditioning system can't be retrofitted to the elementary school.
Right.
There are a lot of different, and we've talked about the classroom sizes and the fact that we are crunching into that building. I think we've even talked about that at the Mason Road School, haven't we? So I think that that's a common discussion amongst ourselves.
Okay, but, so we have a motion on the table. Any other discussion before we take the vote? Okay, all in favor of Mary's motion? Okay, it's unanimous.
So we will.
Motion carries.
So we will come back to you sometime in the next few months, by spring, by our deadline with that, and with the actual wording of the vote that you need to authorize.
And that concludes your superintendent's report, or did you?
Special topics, yes, it
okay.
does.
Okay, that brings us to new business, Director in Finance Operations Report, and that's Rich.
Thank you very much. The Dudley Little League is interested in purchasing, installing, and donating an indoor batting cage to the Dudley Middle School. It's requested that school committee accept this donation prior to the actual purchase.
Okay,
Additionally, Dudley Middle School has received a donation of 40 Everlast reusable smart notebooks. I recommend acceptance of both donations.
okay. I'll entertain a motion to accept the donations.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
I'm going to skip school choice for now. I'm going to combine that with FY19 budget status. So I'm skipping down to athletic field bleachers. As the committee is aware, when the new field was constructed a few years ago at this point in time, there was no planning for bleachers. When I first came here, I was told to find places for people to sit. We procured rental bleachers for a couple of years in hopes that we would have a clear path forward. We did not. I believe 2 years ago, we went back out to bid, yes, because we're in the second year of the bid, to keep the bleachers that we had from day one. When I did that procurement, it was for 5 years, a 2-year plan, and then the 3 remaining option years for the district. The cost over the next 3 years would be basically an average of $38,000 or so. While this was already part of the bid, I am asking that you guys authorize the 3 option years in the procurement.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion for the authorization of the 3 option years.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Why is it the same price every year? Why does it go up instead of down? Usually things go down after years.
I'm honestly not going to tell you I'm an expert in the rental of bleachers. Believe it or not, I am not. So I think it's just the incremental cost of sending employees out to do safety checks and minor repairs. Their expectation, I would imagine, if it would be mine if I were running the company, is as bleachers sit there, there's more and more wear and tear that happens. The green covering in back needs to be replaced every year, et cetera. And businesses are not in business to lose money. They're in business to make money.
Do we ever have the option to buy at the end, or do they?
We don't through this procurement, no.
No.
Rent to own.
I know, like some machines, you can do that with machines.
The reason we wrote the bid this way was 2 years ago, the thinking was we may be at a point where we have actually had capital money now in January 2019 to be able to construct our own bleachers, in which case we'd have these rentals until June, and then magically the bleachers would be constructed over the summer, and we'd be good to go forever. That is not the case. The district decided to pursue the operational override last year. So we could certainly cancel this procurement and put something out to bid for a rent-to-own over the course of 5 years. The costs, I would imagine, would be significantly more than these 3 rental years, but it is certainly something possible, and again, why I wanted to bring it to school committee.
What's the cost of purchasing bleachers?
The numbers that were thrown around when I first started here were in the $500,000 range.
5 to 7. 5 to 7. That would be my estimate.
Yeah, but again, that was 4 years ago,
Yeah.
or almost 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I know I had asked a question regarding some historical reflection on the field and when it was done. I had a recollection that we had talked about continuing fundraising efforts to support the field and some of the ancillary things that we were not able to put in the original budget. So I went back looking for my documentation on that, but is there anything in district files or district notes that talks about fundraising efforts?
I remember one time we were gonna like sell things like names and like rents,
Right.
you know, and then we kinda just, when we got the donation, we kinda stopped, I
Dropped.
think. We more or less stopped. And when we got the big donation, we were gonna do all kind of fundraising, like buy a bleach, buy a step, you know. And we kinda stopped, I think, when we got the big donation. So maybe it's something to look into.
We should look into that.
Is there interest in some group or of supporters that would look to help continue to grow the facility of the field with bleachers, you know, concessions? We had talked about that. That's one of the reasons why, you know, we with the donation that we were fortunate to receive, that we rebranded the field. But this is, it seems to be we're chasing bad money, continuing to rent when we're not putting ourselves in a position to do something on a permanent basis. Is that something that we could explore, is to whether or not, I'd rather put us on a pathway to get to a purchase than this
I
never-ending
would, because
renting
this is
piece.
3 years, about over $100,000.
Correct.
Right?
So this
We
was
could be
a
putting that towards.
short-term
bleachers.
fix, if you will.
Right.
The
Yeah.
least expensive fix to do this. Yes, it's typically, whether it's the turf field or it's bleachers or something, athletic groups, boosters clubs will do that. You'll find that the effort for them to raise the amount of money that you will need will take years and years and years unless you have a generous benefactor that will come along and do that. The other thing that I would caution you, and I'm just sitting here, my head is kind of rolling, is that I remember in, these bleachers would come down and you would have to erect permanent bleachers. There is a code, and I remember this.
It's about the bathrooms.
That
Right,
included-
right,
It
yeah.
isn't just the bathrooms, it is also, it has to do with the press box and handicap access.
Yeah.
And I recall it happening on my watch in Hanover, which the law then got changed. We were being compared to Gillette Stadium, and we needed to have 32 bathrooms. Not we, Hanover High School, not Hanover, but any building being
Yeah.
built at that time in 2009, 2008. My only other, so I know that's changed. However, what I don't know is press box, handicap access, that type of thing. Because I recall in some high schools that I've been in recently, you will see there is handicap access, and I do not know what the regulations are for that, or if there are any, you know, but
There
it'd be
probably
something,
is.
something certainly that could escalate the price, that's all I'm really saying at this point in time.
I guess
If I may.
Stephanie,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Is there a handicap access right now to our bleachers?
To the bleachers, yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right.
What Dr. Nash is talking about is the press
Press
box.
box.
Right.
No, but what I'm saying is, what we have now, okay, so we don't have a press box then? Is that
That's
what?
correct.
Right, typically you'd probably want one.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a little
And-
place where we broadcast. We do have a broadcast station.
If I may, to follow up on Dr. Nash's uncertainty on the requirements, when I had to meet with the architectural board in Boston at a previous district, the bleachers actually did, the press box actually did come up, and it was made clear to us that indeed you do need to have
Right, yeah.
access, ADA access.
Anyway,
I'd like to come to some place where we have kind of a clear direction, so that if we need to explore, if we were to do permanent, what the impact is of other costs, and that becomes something that is going to be unattainable, and we're going to need to continue to have the situation that we have. I think it would just be better to have a clearer plan as to whether or not we're going to be in a continual process of rental for forever.
I think we probably.
Or we're going to have to include a permanent solution as part of our capital planning.
Right, and I think we probably need to get a handle specifically on the cost. The cost of us purchasing and installing
but for
bleachers.
now, we have to continue with this.
So I think, you know, that would give you some sense of, excuse me, Madam Chair, that would give you some sense of determining whether it might be feasible for a community to be involved in any kind of efforts you know, if it's an extraordinary cost, then you may say, well, we really need to push this to capital. It's much too much for us to really ask anyone to fundraise. So maybe that's our next step. But the immediate next step is that we need to make some decisions about continuing on the rental. But then I agree with you, there needs to be a plan. You don't want to rent
this far.
ad infinitum. In 10 years from now, be at the same spot where you are, yeah.
Just,
If I may.
Any other discussion?
I'll reach out to our owner's project manager for the project and find out if they had if they had quotations and drawings done for bleachers, which we can simply get updated costs on.
Thank you. Any other discussion? No? Okay, Jamie, did you want to
Just
say
looking
something?
it up while we're sitting here, there's a bunch of different places where they all say, send in a quote, you know, request, but there's a lot of grant opportunities. That's what came up even before you could get to send in a request, so.
So, that's something to look forward to now. But I'm going to take the vote. All in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you very much. The French River Education Collaborative conducts our oil bid each and every year for the district. We put the oil bid out for the following year. The low bidder was Peterson Oil at a rate of $2.0675, a minor increase over the current bid rate of $2.0611 for FY19. I recommend the committee accept this bid.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So move.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you very much. And now, school choice and the FY19 budget. As I updated the committee last month on the end results of FY18 school choice, the FY19 information was indeed released in December as expected. The district is budgeted to receive $891,000, which includes all sped incremental costs. This is about $40,000 less than what was on the cherry sheets, and that number was about $40,000 less than we had expected to receive last year. So, in the end, the school choice fund is short revenues by about $80,000. While we certainly have a sufficient balance to absorb this hit, my recommendation and my approach, unless told otherwise, would be to look to freeze non-essential expenditures.
Could I ask you what non-essential expenditures are?
The way that I look at it is if somebody were planning something, you know, for example, the biology department is going to dissect frogs in March, but haven't bought them yet because they don't want them to spoil. They may not have purchased them yet, or they may not have created a PO for them.
Right.
So I would ask all the building principals to go through and, you know, basically get all of the POs in place for, you know, expenditure plans till the end of the year as best as possible. What we would want to do is try to eliminate anything that is a, hey, I've got an idea, this is a really cool thing I might want to try out, but I'm not sure if it's going to be successful this year or not, and wait on those if at all possible. The only way I know how to stop digging a hole, to get out of a hole, is to stop digging. And, you know, financially,
Yeah.
with the hits in special ed to circuit breaker, although, you know, I know we'll talk about that a little bit later, and I'll update the committee with the numbers.
I think it's going to be difficult for you to decide whether this is a good idea or this isn't a good idea.
I'm not looking to necessarily be the arbiter of that. I'm looking for the building principals to say, this is something I absolutely need to run my building, this is something I can do without for right now.
And probably not the best example, I know, that programmatically to use frogs, because that is part of.
That's what I was going
That
to
is
say.
part of
That's
the
the point.
curriculum. So we would try to look at, obviously, we need paper, and
Right.
we need
Yeah.
textbooks if we needed them. We'd look at some areas. There isn't a lot. When you look at discretionary / expense budgets that school principals have, pretty much, you know, those have been pared down over the years. In fact, you gave, part of the increase in the funding through the override helped us to restore and put them back and make them more whole. So I would suggest that, as Rich can certainly attest to, that those budgets have been pared down. We can't, we have graduation expenses, those are gonna be borne, we know that. We have certain other costs. So to the degree that I think principals can, regulate that, we're certainly gonna try. If it ends up in the district overall, that it's 50,000 for all 7 schools, that's great. But it's difficult for us at this point in time to tell you, and I certainly don't want to send a message out there that we would not continue to ensure that the curriculum
Right.
and instruction happens. That's not what Rich is saying. And I think principals know what their needs are, and we're going to make sure that they get those. If there's anything that they can hold off on, if there's anything that potentially they don't need, let's look at that. That's really what we're saying. It's delicate when you tell principals, I've done this before, there's a freeze on your discretionary. I can remember one principal saying, what discretionary? I really don't. It really was most of it was spent at the beginning of the year when you order all of that, particularly at elementary. How much is there really? So we'll try to do our very best. What we're really saying is that we need to watch our spending. Let's be hopeful. The weather has not been typically knock on cold. Let's hope. I'd much rather say shut off those lights, people. Watch that when you leave buildings and rooms, and make sure you do that. Those kinds of things save some good money in the long run. So we just need to be very mindful of our FY19 budget so that we, at the end, will have, be where we need to be, particularly knowing next year's budget and cost, knowing that we have a predetermined amount, if you will. So
It's only, when we do the budget, when you say non-essential expenses, that gives the impression there's fat in the budget, and there certainly isn't. So I don't really like that term non-essential. I would just say, watch every penny, because it's not, really, it's essential. It wouldn't have been put in there to begin with.
yeah,
So I don't
we're
like that
talking
term.
about the principal's, quote, expense or discretionary
Right.
budgets that is made up primarily of, textbooks, supplies, those kinds of things. Generally, as I said, a lot of those are bought over the summer, so we can begin a school year. There are certain line items in secondary budgets that will be spent as we get into graduation activities, but there are copier expenses, postage expenses, but those are insignificant, really, when you look at that entire budget. A lot of it has already been spent as they've ordered textbooks and consumables at elementary schools. Those have been spent, and you certainly are not going to put an end to copy of paper or anything else. So we're going to try. I think the caution is that we're, into our budget halfway through, and we just want to say, let's be as prudent. If you can spend
Right.
$49 instead of $50, spend the $49. That's kind of what we're saying to some degree, I think. If that's
But
accurate.
like, if you
That's what we're
need
saying.
cartridges for the
Yeah,
printer,
we
I think that should be
we are not going to not do
essential and
that.
not
Right.
hold
right.
them
We are- I
back,
don't-
or paper.
Right.
We're not looking to
Yeah.
interfere with operations. We
Okay.
simply, I wanted to bring the issue to the forefront of discussion, because it's, again, the only way to get out of a hole is to, A, stop digging.
I just kind of have a different point of view than this is. I think our principals have been told this for so many years already, that there is, like you say, Mrs. Cabela, nothing to cut. And I'm fearful if we put this message out there, we've spent a lot of time this year talking about project-based learning and how much we want that to be incorporated into this school year. And if we start to say non-essential, are we holding back on that kind of a learning environment? And if not, these principals already don't have the funds to get through what they need to get through. I feel uncomfortable, I guess, with that kind of
I
wording.
tend to agree with you, Jamie, because I think we put it in the budget, everything that's in that budget, where we need.
Well, we can
So
hope for
if-
things that would in effect would be like plowing and heating. We can hope for the best on
Best.
that. That's a big budget item.
Typically, Jamie, to answer your question, if I might, Mrs. Terry, I certainly don't disagree with you, and I think, for example, it would be, is there something, you talk about project-based learning, is there, for example, was our senior director going to order some books for some of her group that we potentially could not order and do it differently, that's all, yeah. So we're going full forward with that. I mean, it's not gonna stop that. And again, it's a decision that I would suggest to you is not made at central office. I would rely, as I always have, on the principals who run their buildings, who have, if you will, control over that, their budget, if you will, the expense budget, to say whether or not they can do that. And I would, unless it is, we are not going to, in a budget of $50+ million, live and die, unfortunately, on what all of our principals have combined. There are some other areas, certainly, that I think would have more impact that we'll talk about in the future, but yeah, I don't want to send the message out there. And I don't think that was the intent of Mr. Matthew. I think it was really more of us to recognize as a committee that we're not there yet. We're not there to tell you we've got to do this, but we just want to be a little bit more cautious. And as principals are, when they sign the requisitions that they get sent forward, make sure there is a need. And the case.
Hopefully, we'll save on plowing. There won't be any snow.
Yes. Yes, that,
Yeah.
heat,
Right.
and some other areas that we could control, or hope we can exercise more control over, so.
So, Rich, that concludes.
That's all I have for this evening.
Thank you. Okay, superintendent search. Did I skip some?
Budget and finance.
B.
Budget and finance. B.
Oh, okay. Budget and Finance Subcommittee report, but there wasn't a meeting.
Our meeting was canceled.
Right,
Because
right.
of some
That's why
scheduling
I said-
difficulties.
Okay.
So what we wanted to do in open session was to discuss the meeting time. When we had met in December, we were looking to change it to a daytime meeting. There were some multiple emails going back regarding date and time. People were getting confused. So we canceled the meeting. What we'd like to do is propose going forward how we're going to handle meetings. Previously, we've been doing them prior to this particular meeting. There were some concerns expressed regarding the length of day for some of our staff people, specifically Dr. Nash and Mr. Matthew, being very long days going into a season right now with budget, contract negotiations, executive sessions, having very long days and nights. So to allow for a little bit of a break in their day, our recommendation is to move to a daytime meeting. And my recommendation would be that we meet the morning of our school committee meeting instead of in the afternoon. Mrs. Reed's schedule now allows for daytime meeting, and that would be my recommendation.
Is that okay with the committee?
That's fine by me.
I can't make the 23rd. When will we start this? Next time, the 23rd?
Well, our first, I know we have a meeting scheduled. We talked about meeting on the 30th.
Yeah, is that our next meeting?
We haven't met this month. We could look at an alternate day in lieu of the 23rd. So we can pull out calendars and do that now while everyone is here.
If I might, Mrs. Rabbit, the executive ad council meetings are Wednesdays at 10 a.m. That schedule went out in August. For the entire year, we meet every 2 weeks. So, if it's an opposite, which may or may not be
Why
the
do they
same as
have
your
it
school
down
committee
here?
meetings,
Sure.
that's the only
On the
thing. But
30th.
They need to
it would be
change it.
difficult. I know
change that
all the principals have
But she
worked,
said
have that in their schedule.
I have no
She
problem
can't
picking another day,
Okay, on
a day of the week.
on the
Okay,
30th.
all right.
It doesn't matter to me. I'm no longer available on Wednesday afternoons myself.
Okay, all right, so,
What about, we have down here,
Supposed to be
January
the
30th, is that supposed to be there on the agenda?
Yeah,
We had
it
asked
says
for
the
an
30th.
additional meeting because of budget season.
yes, because
And that was going to
But
be
you
our
just go,
meeting
so
prior
you want
to.
another one before that besides? Is that what you're saying, you want another one before the 30th?
Well, I think
the school
that the meeting on the 30th was going to be targeting specifically budgets, but what we were targeting at this particular meeting was capital planning. And I don't know that we're going to be able to accomplish both topics in 1 2-hour meeting, so I do definitely think that we will need an additional meeting, but I'm open to the desires and the wishes of the members.
could I suggest that, first of all, thank you for considering moving them to mornings, because I think
Right.
Rich and I would tell you that we're probably going to be, we're either no good for school committee meetings or, as you know, the length of our meetings, but also we have some good conversations. It would probably be better if the committee would consider doing another day. Then we'll never run into a problem for me saying then, oh, that's the day of my EAC meeting. So if we did Tuesday morning, it's still the day before the school committee. So you'd have plenty of opportunity. I know that there won't be a conflict, and I can rearrange any of the individual meetings that I have, which are with Rich, I think, and Lorinda on Tuesday. So we can rearrange those more easily than I could have all of my ad council, so.
So if we look at February 22nd, which is a Tuesday.
In January?
In January.
January 22nd.
I'm sorry, January 22nd. Do you feel that we need to meet prior to the budget meeting on the 29th, or will the 22nd cover both the capital planning and the budget? We have the 30th, but do you want to just keep them on Tuesday so that we don't have any confusion?
Sure. That makes
So
sense.
if we do the 22nd and the 29th
Sure.
of
Yep.
January,
Sure.
and then moving ahead, we'll look at February 5th. And,
Is the 5th to Tuesday?
no, wait a minute, sorry,
No.
February 12th,
Okay.
which is gonna be a conflict, that Mars meets on the 12th. Okay, let me come back to that. I know we can then do the 26th.
Are you planning any site visits in there?
Well, that's gonna have to happen too, so we're gonna take one at a time.
Well, the February date,
So the February 12th is the Mars general
Okay.
meeting for,
right.
up at Assabet.
Okay.
I know that,
Okay.
I
All right.
attend that, so,
okay.
for that particular week, can we move to February 11th?
What day of the week is that, Monday then?
Monday.
In the morning?
I think we should always be like the first Thursday, Tuesday of the month. I don't think we should be one Monday, one Tuesday. These are open meetings even if no one comes. And I think we should have a set pattern, just like we have our night meetings. I think it should be either the first Tuesday of the month, or the second Tuesday of the month, or the third. I don't think 1 week, one month is the second, it's too confusing. I don't think that's a good way to schedule meetings.
It's a question of whether or not we can
I
make an
know.
exception for a particular meeting.
But we're making exceptions all the time. We were supposed to have this meeting the other day, and, we were back and forth with 13 emails.
But
before
if
we
you have
canceled
it the first Tuesday of the month, then you know the 3 are coming, or if you can't
Right.
come, then you don't change it. There's just 2
Okay.
there.
I think we should have a
Yeah,
set
so-
date.
I think it should be set. all the
Let's turn
subcommittees.
around and change it, then we'll.
What day do you want it to be?
It's not day of the week, I'm gonna just turn around and say, then maybe it's the first and third.
Of what, Tuesdays? The first and third Tuesdays of the month? Is that what you're saying?
I'm trying to find an open calendar spot. That's not a conflict.
Right
okay?
now,
So, right now, I'm going to, this month, we're doing a makeup meeting. We're doing an extra meeting to accommodate the budget presentations. And we can move forward to looking at the first and third Tuesday of the month.
So what are the
third Tuesday of
dates, so
February
I'll
won't
be
count,
able
that's
to...
vacation week, isn't it?
Right,
So that'd be the first week.
So what are the dates?
In February, that would be the 5th, and then if you did the third Tuesday, it's the 19th.
You know what? Good, never mind. I'm gonna just stick it to the second and fourth, because I have things scheduled and I'm gonna miss a meeting. So you guys can meet on the 12th without me.
Of February?
Yep.
Okay, so 12, so
12th and 26th.
So we're meeting the
26th.
22nd,
Okay.
the 29th
Of January.
of January.
Okay.
And beginning in February, we'll meet the Tuesday, the second and fourth Tuesday of the month.
Then that's not the 5th.
No.
That'll be the
No.
12th.
I just
12th.
changed it to the second
So
and
we're taking
fourth
the 5th
Tuesday of
out
the
that.
month,
Okay, so it's gonna be the 12th and the 26th.
the 12th and the 26th. We'll follow the school committee calendar. We will meet the Tuesday before school committee meeting.
Are these right?
And do we have
Yes.
time?
22nd.
I'm open as early as 8 a.m.
26th, yeah, you got it.
Can we do 8:30?
And
8:30.
at the time, what time?
8:30 to 10:30.
Hours, 8:30 to 10:30?
Mm-hmm.
in the central office, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Can, wait, this will be the second. Okay, all right, thank you.
Elaine, we're all set now on that. That concludes the budget and finance.
Yes.
Okay, Superintendent Search Committee update, and that's you, Elaine.
The search committee is in process of doing finalist interviews. We'll be concluding tomorrow night and deliberating tomorrow night, and on our meeting on the 23rd, we will bring our recommendation for finalist candidates.
Okay.
Do you have any idea how many? It's too early to say. How many?
It's too early to say.
Okay, that brings us up to requests for additional staffing. Point 4, FTE instructional assistant. Dr. Nash.
I'm going to turn this over to SPED Director Lorinda Allen. You have a memo in your packets this evening that asks your approval for an additional SPED instructional assistant. So I'm going to ask her to step forward and to explain that. Also, I believe in the packets we were able to include, because one of our members had asked, and probably asked the same time that I asked, how many does this make that we've added since I've come on board? And so Mrs. Allen prepared for you a pretty lengthy list, 3 pages of all of the positions that you have added, either due to move-ins, to evals that have changed and so forth. So she certainly can address any of that also, but this evening first to talk about the need to add the additional .4 instructional assistant.
Sure. So the .4 instructional assistant is for a student who was just recently identified as a new student coming to us with substantial needs that we can manage within our programs, but not without that assistant support because of the specific needs, which unfortunately, I can't explain further to you than specific needs, because I don't want to identify the student. However, that being said, at our last meeting, you had approved 2.0 positions for instructional assistants. One of those positions at Charlton Elementary, we had a student move out with a 1-to-1, so we were able to not post that position. So in essence, I'm kind of asking you to reassign that one that you approved, reduce it to a .4. And so that's that particular piece. And then if you'd like me to share more about the history and where I see us kind of heading in the future, I'm happy to do that as well.
I'll make a motion that we add the additional staffing of .4 to replace the 1 point. Should I put that in the motion? Do I have to put that in the motion? No, I don't.
I don't think
We just
so.
wanted to explain to you that, you know, you had voted the 2.0. We
Okay.
didn't need that,
Right.
because coincidentally, after that fact, someone moved out that had a 1.0. So we didn't have to advertise and post for that position. So in essence, you've approved over the last 2 meetings a 1.4.
You know, and I can appreciate that you as a committee asked, and it was refreshing that you were concerned of why were we doing this piecemeal. So I was happy to put that together for you.
Thank you.
And kind of
Right.
see it in chart form. And again, I alluded to it in my memo, but just in the next few weeks, you'll be hearing more from me as far as how we've begun to intensively look at the program as a whole and evaluate the program as a whole, and some different people that have come in and looked at it. And until we can change our service delivery model, it's really hard to change the IAs and how we're using the IAs. So hopefully within the next few weeks, we'll be able to explain how we hope to improve that delivery model for more effective services for our students, as well as a better use of efficiency in our instructional assistants.
Now,
Mrs.
Mrs. Kabala did make a motion. Do I have a second on that? Did I have a second?
Second.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah,
Can I
Mary.
say, I just wanted to thank you for putting this together. I did raise the concern that I was not seeing the whole picture of
Absolutely, right.
what we were
It was
approving.
memo and memo and memo.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is really, really helpful,
Okay.
and I'm really looking forward to hearing what the overall plan is.
Great.
So at the next meeting, just for purposes of really sharing more information, Mrs. Allen has put together, we've had many discussions since the beginning of the year, really what I'd call a long-range, kind of a vision, if you will, for a special ed delivery of services that relates to programs and personnel. The two are tied together. And so I think you need to see that big picture to know where we're headed, because it's not a one-year plan. It's a multiple-year plan. And along that way, that will dovetail with recommendations that she brings forward as part of the budget process in FY20 and certainly in the future, so that someone who comes in here and sits in this seat will know that there is a plan in place and the committee has, exercised its will as to whether or not this plan is the direction in which you want to move. We believe it's the way we should move, particularly around equity for all students with disabilities. So I'm really pleased with the work that we're doing and the role that the principals have played in that. I think is really important for me, hearing that they certainly support this and that they are on board with that. So I'm pleased with how we're heading and what direction we're heading in.
Okay, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. Thank you, Lorinda. Consideration to amend policy GCG, substitute teacher, and we're going to have a discussion because, well, we're not going to have the first reading yet because maybe there'll be some concerns or discussion on this, and then we'll have to send it back. But if everybody agrees with it, we will have the first reading. But right now, we're going to have the discussion. So we did see the policy, and maybe Mary can speak to it.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
So I won't go through all of the legalities because I did that in a prior meeting and I don't want to bore you again. But if you have any questions about that, certainly ask, and one of us will try to answer those questions. But pretty much the current policy was carefully analyzed, and we proposed the new policy based on legal issues, appropriateness, and to address the need of the district as a whole. So what we tried to do is really simplify the policy and provide clarity to reduce misinterpretation and really bring it up to date. And also to clearly state what the caliber of individual we're looking for to fulfill the positions that these folks are filling in front of our students. So if you take a look at the current policy versus the proposed policy, you'll see that the current policy has 3 classifications, and we basically reduced it down to 2 classifications, certified, non-certified, and this further defines these 2 classifications as follows. Certified sub is a licensed teacher. Non-certified sub establishes minimum qualifications for a non-certified, which is a 2-year degree, BA, BS, or master's. And then we also have an extended employment substitute section where we define the extended, currently we have the extended sub as an individual hired for a portion of the year greater than 45 school days to replace one particular teacher. In the proposed policy, we didn't substantially change the definition of the extended employment sub other than minor language edits where we changed one particular teacher to a single teacher. And we proposed policy increases the daily rates for anyone coming in for more than 45 days for a single teacher to a new proposed rate. So what we're really trying to do here with the rates is to be more competitive. Over the past few days, as a matter of fact, there's been several TNG articles about the difficulty of all the school districts trying to find qualified substitute teachers, particularly in certain subject areas and day-to-day subs. So we really need to be more competitive from our rate perspective. Also, with the minimum wages having gone up, it's not as desired to come in to be a substitute teacher. It's a hard job, where you can get almost the same amount of money just going someplace else for the day. So we really need to be much more competitive to attract qualified people. So what we did was we increased the rates to a point where we feel that we are either close to or higher than most of the regional area schools. Although there were a couple that recently came forward with new rate changes over the past couple of days that even beat out what we were talking about here, because everyone's in the same boat. And we're really trying to address the situation where the administration and principals are saying that they're really having a hard time getting qualified subs in the door. So you'll see those changes in the rates. We also, let's see, we have a 45-day consecutive day rate bump for a substitute teacher if they're here consecutively. We're open to discussion on making that less if you so choose. There are other school districts that are doing less, some that are doing more. We're kind of at the middle ground, but some of them are at 30 days.
So Mary, you changed it, though. There's not 10 anymore, right?
No, what we did was we eliminated that bump after 10 days.
Right.
And we basically gave the additional money up front.
And then this 45 days, the way I read it the last time, was it didn't have to be consecutive. If the sub was there for 45 days, then they'd get more money, but it wouldn't have to be in our old policy. Am I right?
That's what it said, yeah.
Yeah, in the old policy. But now you're changing it, it has to be 45 consecutive days, right?
No.
No, the total, if a sub totaled 45?
Your
It
current.
says replace a single teacher,
Your
that means it has
current,
to be the same
right,
job.
your
Yeah.
current policy states more than 45 days for one particular teacher. We simply edited that to say 45 days for a single teacher. But we took out.
But it doesn't
your
have to be
current-
consecutive?
No, you're right.
Okay.
We took out, well, if you're with us for a single teacher, generally it is. In most instances, it's usually because of a long-term leave of some nature. What we did take out, Mrs. Cabala, was, the 10 days. And the reason, when we spoke with payroll, what we found was that the majority of those individuals in the last few years, we asked her for the statistics, I think in the last 3 years, or less than 20, who had 10 consecutive days. But most of those, interestingly enough, were in for a single teacher for like 20-plus days. So they were really part of that 45-day, if you will, to begin with. So they would have been there anyway, whether or not it was the 10 consecutive. Most of the time, they were being hired for a longer term. So we didn't see that we were going to impact severely that area, given the fact that there were 5 teachers in 16, 17, 8 teachers, and 4 thus far this year. And of those, she indicated that most of those were already working in long-term situations of 20 or more days, and I'm assuming that some of them could have been even part of the 45-day because they were replacing someone out for a longer-term medical or maternity leave.
But if
So,
they were there for 20 days consecutively, they'll still only get the day-to-day sub pay, because it doesn't hit 45.
which we had increased.
But it's still, they
Right.
won't get.
Yes, you're correct.
I have a
Yes.
lot of questions about it. You've done explaining, because I have some questions about it.
Feel free to ask questions.
Okay, I'll go from A. Originally, we had that have a school approved per diem. Why did we take out school committee approval? That was taken out of the step. The second line of the original policy said that the pay that the school committee approved per diem. Why did we take out the school committee in that sentence? It just says per diem. See what I'm saying? It said school committee originally, but now it doesn't.
Because you will approve the memorandum
I'm just
that will have the,
asking.
we'll have, what we took out of this policy was anything that had a figure with it, because you are going to have to approve of rates, whatever that policy looks like.
I
We
understand
just
that.
didn't say it there because you do it anyway when you approve the policy, that's all.
I still like to
Yeah.
have it there
Yeah.
because
I don't
I
think
don't
it's
know
a,
why-
I don't think it makes a difference whether we have
I
it
don't know
there,
why
so
we took
that's.
it, I don't know why we would take it out, I don't see the rationale once it was there. Because it doesn't say, we know we make the policy, I mean, the rates on another sheet.
Mhm.
But why would we take it out when it was already there? I don't see any point to it. But I'm just asking, okay, my next question on Part A, you know, non-certified substitute, whether it's a kid who's here home from UMass for the Christmas vacation or a person with a master's is going to get the same exact pay, which seems completely unfair to the person with the master's. You're not distinguishing between a 2-year college degree, a BA, BS, and a master's are all going to get the same pay for substituting as opposed to having, before we had it $80 and $85, there was a little difference. Why did we decide not to reward the people with the higher education? I don't get it.
Are you talking about the day-to-day substitute?
Day-to-day sub, you took out the part about, it used to be one without a degree, like we have college kids come back at Christmas time and they sub. But then we also have people with bachelors and masters who just want to pick up a little extra money. And right now, you're taking away the difference on those two categories and making them all get the same pay. And it's not even an increase. They didn't get an increase either, it's still $85. Why did you not distinguish between the two categories of education?
Are you asking?
I'm asking the subcommittee, I don't know, I'm asking the
I
subcommittee.
have to think back, we've had so many discussions about it.
I think
I can explain.
just to trigger your memory, Mrs. Antossi, Mrs. Abishano came in and we went through the statistical information regarding the people that were approved to be substitutes as to the people that were here with or without degree experience, and there was very little variation. And the people that, if I remember this correctly, Dr. Nash, most people were being paid at $80 because most people didn't feel it was worthy of coming in with the necessary documentation to give them the bump up to the 85.
But that doesn't make it right.
Well, I guess, right or not, I guess it was a question of whether or not we felt that it was something that was necessary. If we felt that it was better to create attractive rates and recognize people that were providing a commitment to the district going into those longer term assignments. And I think that we, at the time when we started this policy, probably 6 or 8 weeks ago, none of this had been in the news, and most districts were probably sticking with where they were, but districts are now responding to the fact that this has become a hot topic. We were ahead of the curve initially, and now we're part of the group of school districts that are responding to it. We were looking to create an attractive rate up front.
But you didn't change the rate. The non-certified is still 85 and the certified is 90. You did not go up on the rate. You just eliminated the no degree rate of 80. So you did not go up on the high end, you just dropped the lower end.
Part of it was premised, I think, on the philosophy that we should set minimum qualifications for people who come in to teach. That at the very least, non-degree does not necessarily mean that you have any kind of degree at all. And we were looking, if you look at the definition was that you would at least have a 2-year degree for a daily sub. So that was part of the reason why you didn't need that third category.
So does this mean a kid that's at UMass that came back and subbed at Dudley Middle School last year could not come back now? Are we eliminating college kids like in their senior year? We've always had subs like that come back. Would that mean
Under
they-
the current
they would
proposed
not be able to sub?
policy.
I mean, if they have more degree than they have more education than a 2-year college degree, but they won't be able to sub
They
anymore.
don't,
In technicality, they don't have paper, but
Right.
they probably have more education.
So I think that can be addressed in a couple of ways, under the new policy or the proposed policy. The ability, you can add some language under Section D that would allow a superintendent the ability, because generally a superintendent or an assistant superintendent or someone meets with subs, interviews them. You know, first they're interviewed by principals, so you could give that opportunity. That could happen in many districts. Districts I've been in, we would say, for example, if you're in college, you must have completed at least 2 years and must have been in a practicum or observations, whatever they do over that period of time. I would not necessarily say you take someone who's a freshman or a sophomore in college.
So what rate would they
So-
get? What rate would they be put under then? The
Non-
non-certified $85?
Right, non-certified, right, exactly, yes, yeah. So you can add that language, and then it gives the ability to do that. I don't disagree with you that I think if you've got a student who may be coming for a month, break, that we oftentimes would make sure that they had completed either a practicum in the junior year if they were doing elementary, and/or sometimes a senior year, they would have done that, and, you might get 2 or 3. I can't say that,
Right.
districts
No,
I've been in
yeah.
have a lot, because usually they're coming for that long period of time. They want to work daily, and because we have that break of vacation, they'll go and work at someone's place every day for that month. We can't guarantee them that we'll be able to do that, but I certainly think we could
Okay.
accommodate that.
Another one of my questions, the term extended employment substitute, would it be better to just say long-term substitute? Because extended
Sure,
employment, what does that
sure,
mean? It might mean
yeah,
you work a longer day.
Yeah.
I think the
Yeah,
term, since we're
absolutely.
changing things, would it be better to
Yeah.
long-term
Yeah,
substitute?
because that does
No,
distinguish.
open to that.
Yeah.
I think it
Oh,
sounds
yeah.
better, don't
Yeah.
you? Okay. Here, this is another question. I have a lot of them, if you don't mind, but. So a teacher's out for 6 weeks for maternity leave. Because that's not 45 days in the classroom, that person will still be getting day-to-day pay.
That is
That
one
seems
reason.
unfair.
Yeah, that's one reason why I've seen in districts, and I think Mrs. Santachi said, some of the districts will use 30 days a month. I used in my other districts 30 days.
But even 20
We kept 45 because you've got 45 in there, but certainly you could do that. There's going to be obviously more of an impact financially, on that if you decide
I
to
think
raise that
that's
rate.
even too high. If a person is substituting for 25 different classrooms, they make no preparation. They come in and do the lesson plan for that teacher, then goes to another one. I'm in the classroom for someone who's out with a broken leg for 4 weeks. I'm going to get the exact same pay, and yet I have to do all the prep, all the grading, all this thing. I think some of them, what,
You wouldn't necessarily have to.
if you're out for 4 weeks, you probably have to do.
Well,
you're gonna have to
typically,
let
we
the
would
plans.
hire, so in the case of what you're referring to,
Right.
you would hire one person to come in, hopefully, maybe they're
Right.
certified, definitely they would need to be if they're in special ed, because they're more than 30 days, and you would set a different rate of pay, but you know in advance that they're coming in, because that person is out on maternity
Right,
leave, either
right.
for a month or more than a month, or 8 weeks, and your rate of pay is different. The difficulty sometimes is someone goes out for a week and then something happens medically and they can't come back. And so at that point, as soon as, again, my past experience has been as soon as we found out from the teacher that he or she was going to be out for a longer period of time, at that point, once that notification happens, then we bump that rate up. And you certainly could do that. But most of the times, when you know you've got someone who's going to come in for an extended period of time, a long-term sub, you set some kind of a benchmark. The rate will be this, but if we know you're going to be out for 30 days or more, it's going to be this. And as long as we know in advance that that's the case, you want to set that rate, because the expectation is you're going to be doing more than what a daily sub does. You're grading, correcting, scoring, planning lessons, doing all of that, and you don't want to, as you know, have that rate the same. So it's just a matter of.
But it's not here at all,
But it's
except for
not.
D, which says that you have the superintendent can do whatever he or she wants, basically. D says that.
Well, I think what you might
think
want to
that's too
do is
open-ended.
look at your 45-day and maybe change that number.
Well, we had the 10 consecutive days before. I don't know why we took that out.
Because
10
most,
or more. I don't really care if it's only 3 or 4 people in the business office. They said there's only 3 or 4 subs. That doesn't matter. If it's wrong, I think it's unfair to the subs. I'll just keep going. On C, a full year sub, we're not tying it into the teacher's contract anymore.
Right.
Okay, it says, it doesn't mention anything about health benefits. Is that illegal not to give a person health benefits if
No.
they're working a full year?
no.
Why isn't it?
We are giving them benefits. if
Not
they're
health
a full year
benefits.
sub.
It doesn't say anything
Oh.
about health. Is that
Yeah.
illegal?
No,
Why wouldn't it be? I thought if you work full-time, you get health benefits, Mr.
not if you're,
Mr.
It is
Matthews, is that true?
19 hours, 20 hours.
not if you're a substitute. You have to be part of the teacher's contract.
I thought anybody
I
that
thought
works 20 hours.
The cafeteria
would-
people aren't part of the contract.
My understanding is that they would qualify after
Right.
X number of days.
I would think that'd have to, I would think it would be illegal.
But it's something that we can certainly take
Yeah,
a look
I
at.
don't-
I think
Wasn't this part of the conversation with Attorney Cosgrove?
No, that was mirroring, saying something that the language, in the language that says it mirrors the DCTA contract, because the DCTA contract explicitly excludes substitute teachers, so you don't want to, you know, careful as to don't do that. You know, you may be
it's illegal.
right, you may be
I
right.
think
I think it does not matter whether you're permanent or not.
Right, just
So-
like the retirement.
Yeah.
Just like you have to set up a retirement, whether you're permanent or not. This is still,
So
if
we
you work
will
20
check that, and
hours.
we'll need to add that.
I think I remember this conversation.
Yes, I do
where,
too.
Yeah. It's all coming back
Yeah.
to me now.
And I'm not sure, Mrs. Cabala, if we actually have to say it, because I think the federal law requires that you provide that.
I'd like to
We'll
put it in
check
black
that.
and white,
Yeah.
because we're telling them about their sick days. I think it
Sure.
should be in black and white, even if they have to do it. Also, we had put in just a year or two ago that if a person's in the same position for 2 years, they would be bumped up. We're not tying into the teacher's salary anymore, but we would give them another step. And that's been removed completely from here.
Say that again.
Remember 2 years ago, in fact, it was 2015, I had made the point that if a teacher comes, a certified teacher comes back for second year for the same position, they were still locked in step 1, and we all agreed that that person should get step 2. Now, we're not tying into the teacher's contract anymore, but if I was in the same position for 2 years, which has happened a couple of times, this person would be at the same pay for both years. Now, I know it says the superintendent can do what he or she wants. I don't like D at all, because it gives the superintendent complete freedom on where to put people. I think it should be spelled out. Otherwise, you can do whatever you want, and this whole policy means nothing.
Is your comment regarding the second year based on somebody who is a full year substitute?
Yeah, that happened just a couple, don't you remember that discussion a couple of years ago?
I think that's covered by the fact that we're going to be looking at these rates every year, and we're going to be tying that rate into a breakdown of what the teacher contract is.
It just says on this proposal here, full year substitute certified, $260 per diem. That doesn't say if they're there 10 years, they'd still be doing $260 per diem.
But we're tying it into what the current rate is, base salary for a substitute. And then again, allowing extenuating circumstances. If you wanted to note that the superintendent needs to present the extenuating circumstances to the school committee, I could see doing that. But I found that to be more of a rare occurrence.
It is.
My understanding was that most people that are looking to do a full year substitute are generally people that are looking to be in the teaching field and might be taking that type of a position on their way to moving towards being in a permanent position. So we are still covering that person by the fact that we'll be reviewing rates on a yearly basis and increasing accordingly to our contract.
And the proposed policy for the full year substitute rate is based on the per diem of $260, which is currently in between bachelor's step 1 and master's step 1.
That was my next question. If I were a master's that came in for a full year, I'd be making $52,692 according to the contract. With this certification, which we're trying to help get substitute, this person would now go down to $46,800, a difference of almost $6,000 less in pay. And we're trying to boost the salaries.
I don't go along with the per diem. I think we should have the set salary like we did, like the first step of the teachers contract. And we don't have to say you're in the union. I mean, just
Well,
keep
Well, as soon
that
as you make the
salary.
As soon
inference
as you
that
make
tied
that
it-
No,
difference.
I don't, I disagree with that.
This one doesn't give the bachelors or the masters, they're all gonna get $260 per diem. We're not rewarding people for their educational experience. They're getting the exact same pay whether they taught none at law, or there could be a master's person who decide they wanna come back to work for a year. They're all getting the same pay. We're not distinguishing categories.
If it-
So, I guess.
If a goal is to try to raise, the daily rates and the rates for subs, the number of people that do full-year positions in a school district are, in any given year, probably less than a handful, or even in a number of years. It just necessarily doesn't happen. It does happen at this time, though, Mrs. Cabala. Oftentimes, there are contracts where, in many districts, women out on childbearing can take extended leave. In fact, in some districts, up to 2 years. And it
Up to
absolutely.
15.
And absolutely,
Yeah.
when that happens, I think you need to have that language. You currently do not have that language. I would agree with you wholeheartedly. If you had that language in your DCTA contract or a staff member, then you would want to look at that, because there would be more potential that someone, a teacher, could take up to 2 years maternity leave, and thus you could have a substitute in for 2 years in that same position.
Yeah, but that's
I
what
would
I'm
want to
talking about.
recognize that. You don't have that currently at all, so there's not that. And we've had, I don't know, I can only speak for this year, but, minimal people. The
Well, we did have
area-
that, we did have that in E, I think it was, a C. That if they come for a second year, you see in the old policy, if they come back for second year, they would be giving
Right.
step up.
And I don't think that that's a big enough issue that I think it's important to put in. If the committee wants to do that, that's fine. I want to make sure that the two areas that I think are important are the daily sub rate and that what I call extended sub rate, when we're trying to get people in because someone's going to be out for, medical or maternity leave. But I don't think there's any reason why you can't say that you could set a different rate for a second year if the same person comes in.
And my last thing is, on D, when it says the superintendent has the ability to put them on whatever they want, I think that should be with school committee approval, because we should know what's being done. On D, it says the superintendent has the ability to place a full sub on a different per diem rate in extenuating circumstances. What does that mean? Because I know what it means, like the chemistry teacher this year, the math teacher, but that doesn't say that. He or she could know someone who needs a job for a year and put them on step 10. We have no control over that by saying the superintendent has the right to put them on any step they want. That's what it basically says. But I'm not going to vote for the policy because there's just too many loopholes here, but I'm just throwing out my ideas. If we're trying to improve the rates, we really aren't. For the one who put in the full time, they're not getting the benefits that I think they should. But that's my story.
So what's the committee's wishes?
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Do people feel that on the two pay structure that the current rates that we have are sufficient, or in lieu of the fact that other districts are raising their rates, do we want to look at the daily substitute rates as far as the certified and non-certified are? Based on the news articles now, I know that when we had plotted this, originally, this was going to put us as to one of the highest paying districts for daily substitutes in the geographical area. But based on the fact that now we have several districts that have responded and raised their rates, Spencer East Brookfield has gone to $95 a day. Southbridge is at $95 a day, and I believe Auburn has also responded by raising their rate.
Right.
That maybe we need to,
I think
maybe
so.
we need to look at these particular rates. I'm not as hung up on having to have a third tier as much as I'm thinking that these initial daily sub rates might not be sufficient at this point in time.
Auburn's at 80, 85, they're certified,
I think this is
non-certified.
good with this.
They may be looking, and that may be the reason why that they sent this schedule out. They do have a separate rate for a retired teacher, but most of the other rates are there's one rate, that's it. There's no demarcation or delineation, it's just one rate. That's what it appears to be. So
Right.
that they don't even delineate whether you have certification, whether you
not.
don't, whether you have a degree or whatever. I'm not saying that that's the way to go, but it appears that that's what a lot of them do. Those rates range anywhere from low of 70 in one district, or actually lower than that in one district, 65, all the way up to, I think, 90 for daily, being retired teacher, so. I think the challenge you
I
have,
think we should
Yeah.
send it back and look at some of the concerns.
I'm not as concerned about the language concerns as I am right now as far as the rates. Because I think that the rates that we've supplied for long-term substitutes and full-year substitutes are quite fair. If there's a concern regarding the daily rate, for the committee to, we were comfortable proposing this So I guess it's really where people are thinking that you want to go. Obviously, I want to qualify this by saying that it wasn't our anticipation of making a statement, and I know the information that came out did not talk about timing of this, but I know based on our conversations on budget concerns, this would not be something that we would be able to plan for until the, July 1st, beginning of our new budget. So right now, this is a conversation for planning purposes for the next school year.
So, the committee, what do you think about the rates? Do you
I
think
just want to say something. So, putting both perspectives on paper, if we were to keep the 3 base rates that we had, and have it be without a degree, with a degree for BA, BS, and certification, and we raised all of those up by $5, and then did the long-term as a 30-day, got rid of the 10 consecutive, and got rid of the 45, and just did 30 at the per diem rate that is listed of 130 and 110, because I think doing the 2 for the long term would be okay, because it's still bumping it up quite a bit. Would that be a good melding of the 2?
I guess I'm gonna raise a concern, and I know we discussed this quite thoroughly in policy, but one of our goals was to move towards the fact that our substitute teachers would be having a level of education. And that's one of the issues that we addressed with certified and non-certified in discussing the level of college education. And I think the concern that was addressed as far as a college student who is currently, going to school, we're kind of addressing that with adding that as a language to it. I think the goal was to look for people that were coming into substitute that had a level of education. But, we brought in and looked at statistical information from Mrs. Abishana, who manages the payroll and manages this element of it, to really distinguish out whether or not we were impacting a lot of people, and we, with clarifying it and streamlining it, and we weren't. But again, if this is a major concern on the part of the committee, then I guess we need to probably streamline and maybe look at the policy to help us. If it's going to get shot back to the policy committee, then I think we need to look at it as far as letter A, letter B, letter C, letter D, as to what you do or do not agree with, and then look at the date sheet so that we have some direction. But to go back blindly and say you want us to look at this again, I'm not exactly sure I would know what you want me to look at again, other than the language changes that have been brought up.
Well, as it stands right now, if a college student does come back, if we were to go forward with this, they would not be able to participate as a day-to-day sub at all.
Well, Mrs. Kabbalah brought that up, and there was a language that I wrote down is that a college student who is at a junior level, who has completed a practicum, would be a student that we would
But he'd have to be.
register.
One way, if I might suggest, that you could keep the 3, I'm not talking about the fees,
Yeah.
would be to say, whatever that first level would be, with a 2-year college degree or an equivalent. So you could do that. And that way, there's a level of education beyond a high school diploma. Principals interview or assistant principals subs now. So they certainly can make a determination before they send them to the superintendent, whether that person has the skill set. And we can't always, say that you don't have a skill set because you don't have a degree. So I don't disagree. So you could do that instead of saying without a degree, then you could just qualify it differently.
Right.
If you wanted to keep the 3 levels, and then if you wanted to raise, the rates, you could do that, the daily rates, by $5 or whatever.
Go ahead, Ken.
I have a couple questions about your long-term teacher sub. I know in my particular district, it's very hard to find a sub that is gonna wanna come in for a maternity leave and teach high school math, do all the prep work, stay after school as needed for those kids. And, you know, I think you're gonna miss them on the 45 days. You're not gonna have highly qualified people that wanna do that. I'm wondering if we switch it to 30 days, you know, I don't want to have it 30 days overall, because I think it needs to be for a single teacher 30 days. Because if you have a sub that comes in all the time, but they're bopping around to different rooms, that's a lot different than a contained sub.
Right,
So,
right. Yeah, the expectation of what that sub does over that extended period of time. You know, currently, you're paying them with certification 105. The proposal is to bump them up either to 110 or 130. You certainly can change the 45 to a lesser amount of time. You know, in a lot of districts, it's 30, you know, it's 1 month. In essence, it's 30 days, you know, or whatever, a little over a month in school.
is it school days or days?
Yeah, it's actual work, you know, it's school
Work
days.
days, okay.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
is it retroactive? That was my question.
That's a good question. I can't speak to what the past practice has been here. Unfortunately, part of it is wedded to, as you know, the fact that oftentimes when you get someone, they initially are not going to be out for a long period of time. You know, their earmark is, oh, I'm going out and having something done, I'll be right back, you know, I'll be back, it'll be 2 weeks.
Right.
That 2 weeks, unfortunately, complication turns into more. When there's a notification piece, and that's a clarification that needs to happen, that our process isn't exactly, and we probably need to look at that in our discussions with the union. And I'm sure they would probably like to have something defined like that. When we say this is the process, and we know, meaning, you know, benefits and everybody else knows, then you know when you meet with them and you give them their hire letter for substitute, you spell it out in that, the anticipated start date, end date, and because of that, this is your daily rate. But oftentimes, we don't know, and that's the problem we've run into. You know, I have a couple, now, we know they're going to be, we expect, based on the conversations with the administrators, that they will be, you know, more than 45 days. So we will start them at that rate, because we anticipate that. As soon as I used to find out, I would say to that person, you know, to the degree that I could go back and do retroactive, in some instances I would do that, but I didn't always have that luxury in other districts.
Well, I think the way our rates stated now, it says after 45 days, I don't think you can go back and give them.
Right, yeah.
So if you
You're
hide
exactly
somebody,
right,
so
yeah.
it's the 44th day, there's this, 45, they go up, you can't go back. The way this old one reads, it says after 45 days.
Yeah, and the clarification, you know, here, the clarifying is, if I know you're coming in for that single teacher and I know it's gonna be for X amount of
Right.
days, I start you at this rate. It's not exactly, it's exactly as you had said, it's not if I'm gonna be 45 days for 45 different teachers, or, right.
Right.
It's, I know for Mrs. X, you're coming in, whatever that number is, magic number, I'm gonna start you at a different rate.
Okay, now Mary and Elaine want some direction. How about the rate? Do you want to go up on the rate?
We do have an audience. If you get a chance, you have an audience question.
Oh, okay.
Whenever,
Oh, wait.
just one.
We have to give you two direction, because you don't want to go back blindly
Right.
redoing this
Can,
policy.
Mrs. O'Coin, can I just make sure that we're clear on what we have talked about
Okay,
so far?
go ahead.
So, I'm sorry, Mary.
Go ahead.
On A, there is looking to add the language that, the per diem on line 2 will be paid on the per diem salary schedule approved by the school committee. So we're looking to put school committee approval on that piece.
Does
That one-
everybody agree with that?
I do, I don't care.
I don't think it matters.
Yeah,
To me,
no.
It really doesn't matter.
Okay, so
Okay.
we don't,
Do whatever.
do we want to make a note on there that I don't know if it's necessary that you want to note that the memo for rate schedules will be presented at a certain time of the year that we're reviewing it? I don't know.
I don't think it's necessary. If you
No.
want my
Okay,
opinion,
all right.
you can find
Yeah,
that
I'm fine.
information if you wanted to.
So this is not There's not a consensus on that piece, but on B, we are looking at a word change to long-term employment
Excuse me,
substitute.
Mrs. Rabbit, and are you gonna change that two-year college degree to something better?
I wasn't gonna get into that
Oh,
one yet.
okay,
I'm just
okay,
gonna go for the
okay.
ones that I know were
Okay,
clear,
okay,
that I clearly
okay.
understood.
Yep, sure.
So, school committee approval on a straw poll doesn't look like it's, okay.
If you put it in, I'm not gonna say I'm opposed to it.
Okay.
I just don't care.
I just want to have direction, so Mary and I would really like to just do this only one more
The straw
time.
poll is, it doesn't matter.
Whatever.
It doesn't matter, okay.
Whatever.
All right, so, and then the change of term to long-term employment substitute.
Good.
The
Every
big
time
qualifying
we see it.
factor here is changing from 45 days to 30 days, and that's something that I think we need to have a
Right.
clear piece on, Mrs. O'Connor.
Right.
So, is the consensus that everyone wants to move that to
Yes.
30 days?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so that's good, all right.
And not retroactive.
And we'll make sure that the language, because the language, do we need to look at the language so that it's clear that it's not retroactive? I mean, I think you've made the point, if you're hiring somebody coming in knowing that they're coming in for 30-day position, that they're coming in at that higher rate.
Right.
If there's somebody that's filling in for 2 weeks and then that person extends out another 6 weeks, we can't go retroactive, we can only move their rate going forward from that point in
Once we're
time.
made aware of it,
Okay.
Yeah.
then we would change that.
Okay. The full year substitute, we're gonna just confirm whether or not the health insurance piece,
I'm pretty
if
sure.
if it's part of law, how we
Yeah.
want to word that accordingly.
I looked it up, it is part of law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a question of how we wanna word it.
But
Just
I'm
the
just
health
telling you, I
benefits.
looked
Just be
it up.
eligible
Yeah.
for
Massachusetts.
health
It
benefits,
is.
that's
I
all.
know it was.
Yeah.
Dating it,
Right.
not
And
debating it.
can I go back to why would we say, why is it so clear that we don't wanna say retroactive? Why are we not allowed to do that?
Excuse me.
Why are we not allowed to go retro?
It was something that was not in our previous policy. If you wanna propose that we look at whether or not it's retroactive, it's now a new piece that we were not looking at. So we did not
I
look
just wanted to clarify why.
We didn't, it was, our previous policy states,
After 45.
after 45 days.
Okay.
So it was never part of our original policy.
Just wanted to clarify.
And then D, the superintendent has the ability to place a full year substitute or an extended employment substitute,
Change that to long-term, every place you see it.
long-term,
Yeah.
with school committee approval.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And then now we can go to the separate memo that has the tiers and the rates. Mary, am I missing anything?
No, that's all I have.
Okay. So Mrs. Reed proposed on the daily rate having the 3 original base rates with the entry rate being a 2-year college degree or equivalent. The mid-tier would be with a BA or BS, and the highest rate would be with certification. So the preference is that we're staying with 3 tiers
Does
for the
everything-
daily, day-to-day sub.
I agree with it.
I
Okay.
agree.
Now, I guess the question is, where are people on rates?
Well, you didn't go up on the rates for the, it's still 85 and 90, so maybe you should bump them all up 5.
Yeah.
So they are.
No, they didn't go up. Certified
Yeah.
is still 90.
Yeah,
Non-
none went up. It
non-certified
was
is 85.
90
Not
and
in the data.
The
85.
highest rate would be 95 for certified
So it goes
teacher.
all up 5.
If you were to look at the minimum wage,
Yeah.
at $12 an hour now for 8 hours, you're at 96, so I think it might behoove us probably, yeah, the more
To
I
do
thought-
90, 95, and 100?
No, well, at least,
No.
no, to do
Do they work an
80,
8-hour day?
85,
They don't work an
90,
8-hour day.
no, but
They work a 7-hour
given
day,
the
it's
choice,
84.
right, they work a little less than that,
Yeah.
but it's just in
If you
in
push that
terms
up, then
of-
you're gonna have to push up the long-term. You know, they'll be too close. I think 85, 90, 95 is fine.
85, 90,
95,
95. Yeah,
I think that's fine.
like $5.
I don't want to confuse the issue, Mrs. Rabbit. I just thought of something on the other page that I read in my notes I forgot to mention. If I'm in here for 45 days, do I get any benefits of sick time, or do I have to get health benefits if it's only 45 days? Does it have to be so
You
many?
have to be 90
Uh,
days.
I don't know,
With
is
the
that
health
what,
benefits,
is that
I
what the
believe
law
it is.
says?
I didn't look at that,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's,
Uh,
it's.
I don't
I think
I
it's
don't, I think it has to be
I
full-time,
think,
but I
I
don't
think
know.
it's, right
The
away.
health benefits were
No,
based upon
not for,
over 19
not for
hours.
less than a year.
You should.
Yeah, it's 90, because
hours a
we
week.
had that
That's
discussion
what it
today about a teacher, and I was talking with the benefits coordinator, because I have a substitute, yes, who could come in, and it's a 90-day.
It's 90 days before.
Yeah, I believe so. We'll double
can
check
check.
that.
Mrs.
Okay,
Terry
check
said
on
it
that,
says
'cause I-
19 hours a week makes you automatically.
Well,
I
that's
know,
different
that's what I
from
mean.
a substitute, someone who's not a full-time
Regular
employee.
I don't think
Regular
so.
employee.
We're talking about temporary employees.
Right, two different.
So I think maybe one of the things as the policy subcommittee, reviews this would be a good idea to include in the policy X number of days for temporary employees to receive health insurance benefits.
We spoke about temporary employees right in it, so.
Yeah.
We'll
you
check
guys
it
can
out.
read it.
Check it out.
You have to check that out, because I still think after 19 hours, you have to.
Well, that's eligible if you're a permanent employee, you're exactly
I
right.
don't
You're
think
eligible. Once you hit that .5 if you're a teacher. If you're a .4 teacher, you're not eligible. If you're a .5 teacher, you're eligible. And in fact, that's when MTRS starts taking out of you there. But if you're .4, you're not.
I know,
So
but if you're
for an
not,
hourly employee,
you've
I
got
think
to
it's-
stop, even if you're not a permanent, I'm going to talk about the retirement, you have to establish a retirement for a substitute.
So
Even if you're
one of the
not-
things that I did, because we asked
I'm
this,
gonna look-
we
I'll
asked
have
this
to-
question, is if someone comes in even as a full year substitute and they take health insurance, as long as once they're no longer employed, their health insurance terminates.
Right.
So if someone is hired and they're only here for 90 days,
They're
by
not
the
gonna
time,
take it.
by the time they become eligible for health insurance, they're going to no
Right.
longer be covered.
Right.
So we'll throw another wrinkle
I'm
into
gonna
all
throw
of
in
this.
another thing. Do we pay the 75-25 split? I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there. Do they get the benefits
I
of the?
believe
Can we
they
leave it
have
in
to
your
be
sets?
eligible.
Well, these are questions they never
I
thought that should have been
I
thought.
believe I checked that, and they have to be, they're eligible for
Whether you're
whatever
here
the
one
benefit
day or
packages
5
that
days.
you offer to everybody else.
So that'd be
Yes.
75-25.
Yeah. The only thing that, well,
You gave us some
Um,
info on this.
if you are
We just
someone
need
who
to
comes in
double-check
as
the
a
numbers.
substitute for full year, and you do it for multiple years,
Mm.
you achieve PTS status in accordance with the law,
Right.
because the law does not define the difference between permanent and temporary. So just as an FYI, I always say that to principals, just be careful. You love that substitute for a full year, you use them this year, you use them next year, you use them the third year. At the end of that third
Oh,
year,
yeah.
they're eligible
You
for
know that.
PTS status.
Yeah.
That's the state law, so that happens when you have long maternity leaves, when you have a, that, but it's not an issue too often.
And in order to move forward here, because it's late and I feel like we've talked about this a lot, do you think we could leave it up to Mr. Matthew and Dr. Nash to look
Well,
into the benefit,
we
to
can
look
do
into the
that.
benefit
Yep,
piece,
yep.
and then provide that information to our policy committee,
Yep.
who can
They're meeting next
put
week
it in
anyway.
their draft back to us?
Yeah, we'll double check that. The policy committee, I think, is meeting on the 17th.
17.
And I
yes.
think, Mr. Sage, you wanted to say something.
I might throw an onion wrench in here, but what do you mean by a certified teacher? I have, in 1973, received a lifetime teaching certificate for K through 8 in New Jersey. Does that mean I am a certified teacher in your eyes?
Because it doesn't say licensed in Massachusetts and certified in Massachusetts, one could assume, I suppose, and this is just, I'm speaking personally, I would probably say that, yes, I would say you can provide certification. It doesn't say you must provide Massachusetts certification. I, quite frankly, have never seen that spelled out where it said that. It simply says certified. You're licensed in Connecticut and you've retired and you're living in
Right,
Massachusetts.
they all do that.
You are a teacher. You know, I mean, that's how I feel about it.
Well,
when
I don't feel that way, having lived with a teacher for
Yeah.
many, many years.
Yeah,
I
you
see
know.
what she has to do on a daily
Yes,
basis.
right.
I don't think I would survive in your classroom
Yeah.
today. And that's a certified
Yeah,
teacher
right, right.
saying
Yeah.
that it has changed a
It
whole lot
has.
from
It
1978.
absolutely has, yeah.
Okay,
Is there
so,
some way of evaluating a certified teacher as a substitute?
I think it pretty much becomes obvious after they're in a class for
Well,
a day or two.
I think
It's pretty obvious.
the principals do a pretty good job of that when they interview them, or the assistant principals, whoever. So I think, you know, given the fact that they never interviewed, we're doing a much better job ensuring that. And again, it's supply and demand. A lot of it is, people who've retired and will come back and do certain, will come and sub. We've got a couple of those that we're just bringing in right now that are willing to come in because it's winter and they'll do it right now. But, as spring comes on, it becomes more difficult.
I realize I've eliminated my substituting in this town.
Tipped your hand.
To go back to A now, then we'll be changing the language to the daily rate is based on 3 classifications.
Yes. Yeah.
Certified, non-certified, and 2-year college or equivalent.
Yeah.
Can I just also ask the question of, is there a follow-up to the hiring policy that says that, or procedures that are done for hiring that substitutes are interviewed by central office administration?
Process. That's
a
a
process?
process. I would
Okay.
put that in policy. That's absolutely.
No, I was just asking
yeah.
you if there's a process piece that would then be amended to.
No, we don't need to. We've got,
All
they've
right.
received it and they follow it.
Easy job.
So
Is this
if I,
uniform? What's on?
this,
Have we done all
No.
this? I was gonna say, I hope it started.
this is all done now except for the qualifications as
Sure.
far as
That
health
says
insurance.
that.
Yeah, so we can get the benefit piece.
Can I ask you, are you fearful that right now, if we don't make a vote on increasing just at least the rate of pay, we are not competitive enough to obtain subs?
This is not something that we were planning on for this budget cycle.
So no matter what, this has to wait
This,
until.
this would be, we're adopting this policy with
Fair
these
enough.
rate changes effective July 1st.
Okay. I
And
just
Jamie,
wanted to make sure.
this survey just came out
Okay.
from the superintendent in Auburn, so if you look at even your current rates, it's within the ballpark of this anyway.
Fair enough.
So I think we're okay. I think it's gonna be a struggle probably for all districts
Okay.
next year and in future years, as it always
Okay.
has been.
So we'll move on to our next meeting dates. And the superintendent search committee will be January 10th, and Elaine said 5, right, Elaine, on that one? 5 o'clock? Okay. And that's in the central office. And on the 10th, negotiations subcommittee with the Dudley-Charlton Teachers Association. That's going to be,
Tomorrow night.
Yeah, but we
it doesn't say where, so
We're-
it can't be where they're having it.
We are in my office. How's
Okay,
that?
fine.
Okay.
Figure it out.
So it'll be in the central office
It'll
in
be a
Dr.
love
Nash's.
overlap, Mr. Foley. It'll
Okay.
be a love fest in that
Well, we were
office.
there for, we picked these dates. once.
And then the policy subcommittee
I
will
know, we
be,
have a problem, because we're gonna see the people being interviewed, aren't we?
They are.
We're in the same place.
Are you tomorrow night?
Tomorrow, we've had this meeting on for months.
Right. I
Well,
think we
lock
certainly-
yourself in his
We certainly
office.
can come here, and we can meet in this library, which might make it easier. So we
don't
we
care,
can meet
I'm
in the
just saying.
library.
Yeah,
Is
put
that
blinders
okay?
on.
I know,
with
draw the
you?
blinds.
Library.
I'll bring my truck, we can drive around to it in the truck.
How about if we just meet in the library tomorrow, that
That's fine
way,
with
at
me.
4? Okay.
okay.
Yes,
Okay.
I hear you.
All right.
And then on January 17th, the policy review subcommittee, Charlton Middle School at 10 a.m.
Yep.
And then our school committee meeting will be on January 23rd, and that will be at the Charlton Middle School. And now let's see if we've got all this. Okay, on the 24th, the negotiation subcommittee again, and that will be in the library again, 4 to 6.
Well, then we can
We'll
probably use the other
establish it
one.
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Okay. And now the budget and finance, I hope I have these right, January 22nd, and it's 8:30 to 10:30. January 29th, 8:30 to 10:30, that's the regular time now. February 12th and February 26th.
Right,
Okay, and that will be in the central office.
right.
Okay, and future agenda items, FY20 budget, policy review subcommittee report, superintendent search update, request to increase driver ed program fees, request to increase nurse substitute rates.
And then-
Anyone else want to contribute?
We have
Yeah.
the,
I think we need an executive session to go over, because we're going to be
Yes.
negotiating the next step.
yes.
Okay, exec
Yep,
session.
we'll put those on regularly.
Yeah.
And then we also have Mrs. Allen presenting.
Okay.
for the,
Can we have a follow-up on the transfer amount and the funds for TD, please?
Okay. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? All in favor? We're adjourned.